Patreon.com/Tyler. It wouldn't be alive if we had never started 7 times. Would it even be alive? If we didn't restart, or if I didn't have to do 19 acceptances for collaboration requests, would it even be alive? But let's see if we can get this thing going. Because like I said, I want to get the fuck up out of here. I don't feel like... Well, unless you got something you want to talk about. Like I said, man, if y'all got ammo, I'm willing to hang out in the trenches, but I really don't have much to say. I don't like talking, but I ain't got much to say. But we're going to roll off of what Pharaoh got in mind. We'll see what he got in mind. He joined us. Let's see if we get the... What's going on? How y'all doing? It is what it is, isn't it? Pharaoh, I don't know if it went through. Man, I'll be getting it on your end, but I did what I could on my end, man. This is always a struggle. I plan on doing StreamYard in the near future. For those of you that got StreamYard or use StreamYard. This taco meat under here. Where'd we go, man? What's up with Pharaoh? He was just up in here. I'm really not trying to waste nobody's time. Please bear with me. Cena said he joined us. What's the deal, man? There we go. Yeah, no, I handled that immediately, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, there is definitely something, that's why I stay out of the limelight, because just trying to get back on, the screen was loaded with ads, just advertisements. Literally, it could not get to your page at all. Ads that I'd never seen before in Serbo-Croatian and Spanish, literally just blocking. So I had to shut down the app and start again just to get into the app again, because it was loaded with apps, or not apps, but ads on this thing. So I'm not liking Instagram. I never really liked it at all, but there's definitely something nefarious about these apps.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, well, TikTok just got bought by 80% by 2 different tiny hat people, and forget the guy's name. I think it's Larry Ellison, right? I think he bought the lion's share of TikTok, and then he already owns he's gonna have such a monopoly on outlets, as far as media outlets, and it's just, we're in a crazy time as far as that, man. I mean, because
the purpose is to limit communication, to monitor and control communication, and of course with this these new so-called technologies and innovations in faking and creating scenarios, including sentient or people, the images of, the likenesses of, there's going to be a lot of corruption and reproduction, putting it lightly, of people and their faces and their voices, etc. So using these apps, even for the so-called average individual or typical everyday person, is going to be a minefield.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, like, I feel like they put Elon Musk up there as far as, like, people just think the richest man in the world, but that position is constantly changing, but people just assume Musk. But Larry Ellison was the richest man in the world a few days ago, and
Mm-hmm.
he's the same guy that owns Oracle. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not like he had been, he, like, TikTok, when they talk about TikTok, they always say, like, oh, because China owns it or whatever, or ByteDance owns it, and it's a Chinese company. But that Oracle has already been controlling all the American servers for TikTok, so it's not like they've had any Chinese threat. The reason
Exactly.
that they're taking it over, I mean, obviously for influence, and then the person that monitors it is a former IDF soldier, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with just like amazing levels of propaganda and monitoring, and I don't. I think that, yeah, people just think like, oh, richest guy. They just think Musk. I feel like he's just such a manufacturer, like such a creation, to
Mm-hmm.
make people not even realize, like, nah, man, it's plenty of other players, and this is just
Many of
one
them
little
are
guy.
unnamed. You have a lot of unnamed players and doers, not just the front people, the spokespeople, the talking heads, the ones who go to the dinners and put on the suits or the tuxedos and the gowns, not just them, because they're not really doing anything. Power is not in the so-called money. Power is in the control of sentience, the people. And the more you have under your control, and not even necessarily under your control to that degree. I mean, you can control markets, meaning you control people, but it's primarily those who willingly do for you. And of course, that changes as it goes through the ladder, so-called ladder. The closer they get to managerial or executive, of course, now you're getting into bloodline, perhaps, or um, marriage connection or some other type of connection or even investment, then you can get in there. But usually they only trust it to certain people who have been investigated thoroughly, and then they can get into those upper echelons of executive beyond management, the so-called upper level, middle level management. But those who are in the, I don't call them trenches, but those who are actually making and manifesting all of the things that we come in contact with, the so-called coders, engineers, et cetera, analysts, and who knows what other kind of titles out there. Those are the ones, no differently than the individuals who work for the food manipulating companies, so-called food manipulating companies, and the ones who alter and defile and contaminate supply systems and supply chains and water supplies and aquifers and everything else and agriculture. It's those researchers, those lab people, the ones that you probably see when you stop at a traffic light next to your car. Those are the threat, and they're the ones that are hidden, and they stay hidden. Those at the top, so-called top, they're there to showcase and be showcased. And of course, their faces change. They don't change in income, because it's not about the income. As I said, it's about the bodies and the land masses and the resources that go with it. Of course, the wealth is in the form of assets, and one of the primary assets is people and their future generations. So, when you have a control over the future generations of bodies, sentience, that's wealth to that degree. There was someone sent me a video, could be real, could be fake, who knows, but it was of a huge, massive dinner, so-called gala, uh, white tie, I presume, because the only one wearing a black tie was someone serving. But all of the males had white ties. The females obviously had different gowns, but unknown designers who are maybe some, I call street designers, the one that you can get if you have $500,000, but these are unknown designers, dresses and gowns made specifically for them. And at this allegedly gathering for who knows what, maybe just to gloat or be seen primarily. Well, they sent me that video, and these things don't change. They constantly stay the same, and it's done deliberately so that when your so-called history is reviewed or looked back upon, those will be the faces and the names you are supposed to remember. They will instill them in your head. when it comes to something that is holistic, truly constructed in truth for the benefit of all. Let's say a road that does not cut off or marginalize Aboriginal people, but a road that is necessary, that takes all people to a place where they can all, benefit using that road. That road is built by usually men, but often sometimes women too. But these are people. Their fathers, their mothers, their brothers, their uncles, their aunts, their sisters. You don't remember their names in history. Their names are just left to the side, like the pebbles that you run over in your car. The only people you would associate with that road is some wealthy individual who may have been named as the dedication sponsor, whatever, or the politician who was controversial at that time. So why would that person be the one associated with that particular thing? That's how it's set up. It's called deification. And they do these things to be seen because it's deification. You call celebrities idols. That's where it came from. And idols want to be seen. In order to be seen, you have to be placed in the media. And someone has to give you the keys to the media. And because of that, those who are in your throngs, or so-called fanatics, or your fans, they worship you through their adoration and purchasing your merch. This is all a cult. And it's a deadly cult. So this is all part of it. So their minion and their millions or billions are just for the sake of showcasing. They control workers, obviously not through their billions, because the billions remain the same and the workers, they remain the same. No one is actually gaining anything other than them. The workers still get a certain type of wage or salary, and it doesn't really change. But the so-called owner, CEOs, if not owners, their so-called salaries are always at a high end, and they're never affected by economies. They're never affected by increase or decrease in the people that do all of the work, whether they're evil, wicked, or ignorant. And that's pretty much most workers, or deliberately oblivious. Most people go to work and don't want to think about the wickedness of the company that they're working for. And then there are those, they might care, but they have so much on their plate, they don't have time to go and investigate, but there's always time. And now with this internet, no one has excuses. So you can actually look up the wickedness of your company and make a decision on that. So this is the world in a breakdown, in a nutshell. Yes, they will be monitoring, but it won't be these rich people doing it. They don't care about what's being seen. They have their minion that actually are focused on everyone else. They're just there maintaining the game board. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess they don't really need to care about the average person if they got the people that's kind of like the overlords over them.
No, I mean, look at those who have impacted areas that they have no expertise in whatsoever. The one that you can name them right off bat. Bill Gates. I don't even like mentioning their name because it's like a commercial, but he goes around giving speeches and talks on genetics, population, sociology, you name it, actuarial studies. He has no background, at least according to his bio. And even if he does have, that self-edification background, meaning he studied it or he has someone teach him, he still is no expert. His specialty, allegedly, is in the IT world, and that's where they say pick a lane and stay in it. Well, that's the lane he's supposed to stay in, but that's not the issue, really. The issue is how everyone allows him to go in and out of his lane. How many of those listening now, and those that and just exponentiate it, just grow from yourself and think, how many of you and those you know and don't know would allow someone to step outside their lane and start acting as if they know everything? And then worse, you're going to follow what they say. You wouldn't allow it. You talk them down, you shout them out, you wouldn't allow it. But yet here you have all of these individuals just because of their wealth. They know something.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's pretty. I mean, I guess it's it creates a lot of that nepotism, so much of that because you have the wealth, and then you got a bunch of people and doing things that they weren't even designed to do, and don't even really have any business doing. But I guess it all kind of stems from people being in places where they're not supposed to be, and things of that
No,
nature. But
it's just wielding the so-called power over masses that are distracted and still bought into a so-called system that says there is logic, but yet they ignore logic altogether. Logic would say, I'm not going to take directions from the blind man who's been blind all his life about how to get down a highway if he's never driven and I'm asking him for driving directions. I'm going to ask the truck driver,
yeah,
so why are we, not we, but why are me, I'm not, and I don't think you are either, listening to these individuals who have no say or purpose? Well, they have a purpose, but they have no right to be speaking to the things that they speak to. Yes, they might be funding them, and you know how that ruling goes. If I'm funding some system or some institution, then yeah, I can say whatever I want. They allegedly call that capitalism. Okay, if that's part of capitalism, then that should tell you a lot right there, and you're ignoring it. That means if you don't have the clout, then your vote means nothing because the vote is your voice. So if their voice can go in any lane because they've got the clout behind it, that means you have to have clout too. It's always been like that. Well, at least as long as, as far as so-called history goes, as long as the troglodytes been in rulership. But it's always been about, from the gentleman farmer to the multiple landowner to the multiple so-called slave owner. And mind you, by the way, I'm not referring to any particular so-called race because it was deliberately done this way. And this is a little aside. It was done this way to make you, as I said before, think of the so-called Aboriginal American, aka so-called black person, as the default for a slave, when in actuality you know full well that mostly so-called whites, Slavic individuals, Asiatic people were the first slaves in the sense of the transatlantic slave era. And that's not told because it was done deliberately. You have to stigmatize it and stigmatize those associated with it. This brings the people down. So now, and then you'll see it becoming more and more popular. You're going to see more so-called white people and those who know the truth but have kept it hidden saying that whites were slaves. Many, many millions of whites were slaves, but it's not going to have the same stigmatizing effect. It'll almost be fashionable to do that. So there's a big difference, and the timing is all deliberate. If this was done 150 years ago, you would see a totally different, everyone would be poor Irish in mentality, living in ghettos, not amounting to much, constantly using slavery as their impetus for everything that happens to them in their lives, and only stepping into the so-called systems from an inferior POV. And that's
yeah,
what stigmatizing does.
yeah. No, I mean, like we had spoke before about the Constitution already having been in place and everything prior to even calling it America. This model or these themes that are within the Constitution that already existed, and it just got plagiarized. And I was looking at some maps, and I kind of wanted to ask you this a while ago. I just slipped my mind that because it was a map saying that I think it was New England. They called it Nuremberg,
Mm-hmm.
and it had all these. The map had a bunch of castles and all. It didn't look like it was just some unsettled land.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you about that, like what Nuremberg is, what it means, and Also, a few things, man. The Irish connection, because you brought up the Irish as well, like the original Irish, and because it seems like that they were the ones that took the Constitution, and I think the history's been reversed. I think, like we've talked about, like I think that they took it from here and then took it and created the Magna Carta and all of that over there through this Irish connection. But the
Mhm.
original, whoever the original Irish are,
Well, keep in mind, you had a lot of Europeans coming over here prior to what you call the so-called colonies, um, and establishing a lot of different connections because there was trade going on between this continent and Europe. Europe was being built up, and you're being taught that it was just the opposite, that here was being built up. No, Europe was being built up. Europe, parts of Africa, all being built up. Asia was built up already. So was
yeah,
most of the Americas already built up. This is Asia, America. The Americas and Asia are two of the oldest or oldest established land masses, oldest civilizations, older than Europe, older than Africa. There is no such thing as the Middle East. There is no such thing as the Levant. That's all Asia.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely things across Asia that are, that are not only massive, but just like incredible architecture. So.
And kept hidden through, the thing that you had brought up earlier shows collusion, and this is what and it's deliberately done. They know that the masses of people, and I don't like to refer to everyone as a mass, but your clerics, your politicians on the upper levels, they recognize this. They're very disrespectful individuals, wicked beasts in that sense, because they know that there's a lot that the people do not know. In terms of even civics, most people don't know a lot about how the operations go and how they should approach these venues when they go into things, or about such things as jurisdiction. You don't have to be a so-called Moor to know about these things. You don't have to be a so-called sovereign to know about these things. But these are just basics that should be known. But all of those individuals that I mentioned, they know that the average individual has very little knowledge of it. And this is where there's power for them. So how do you fix it?
Yeah.
Out of that stupor. There's no reason for being in it. This is the age of knowing right now. It's a window. When it closes, it's closed.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It seems like that there's obviously been examples in history. You don't even. I think just looking at the way things are now, obviously there were things that were hidden and things that people had to carry internally because everything was wiped out. The books was wiped out. I mean, you see it in like movies being depicted, like in the Book of Eli or whatever, where the book was lost, but
Oh, that's that,
he kept it internally.
yeah, exactly. That's programming. They want you. They put these lies out there. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the burning of this house, the burning of that. All the way up to the burning of the Reichstag. No, they took out what they needed. In the bombing of Iraq, they took out what they needed. They went in there first. They had their special ops go in and clean house. These are people who have backgrounds in archaeology, and they know exactly how to go in and carefully remove things without damaging them, and they skirted them off, just like the major books. They will bring in copies and fakes and burn that. Anything that's, unnecessary, what they deem as unnecessary, but they are not burning that knowledge. They have repositories all around this realm. Utah, Rome, Tuscany, Patagonia, parts of Beijing in China, they actually have repositories of books, primarily underground, some above ground, where they maintain ancient records, artifacts. They're not going to burn all of that. These are not cretins to the degree that they're cretins in the sense that they will block knowledge from those that they don't respect.
But this is what you came for, though, is the knowledge more because you know that all the power follows that.
Correct. They came for that, and that's what they wanted, and that's what they got. So, I'm in this upcoming podisode that you'll hear soon. It goes into, as I mentioned earlier, about land ownership and not ownership. as well as the knowledge base. One of the knowledge bases is the Vatican. It's a huge repository of skirted, purloined um, knowledge and artifacts from countless periods that you would not fathom, and your jaw would hit the floor immediately if you found out where the written text came from and the things that are in them. So yeah, you know, these things are not burnt, but that's the story they put out there for you. No different than the things that you see today in the media, from so-called public assassinations to, and now, of course, through the efforts of these so-called great minds from all around the world, from here, from India, from Asia or Europe, all over. I'm talking about those coders and programmers and engineers, because those are the ones creating these false so-called AI systems. Mind you, that's not new either. But with this, now you can manifest all these different alternate realities. So you can now fabricate a history. You can fabricate a future because many believe what they see immediately without question. So now it's going to be very difficult to determine. You have to now find, there are ways to determine the fake from the real.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess ultimately with the monitoring as well. I mean, they can alter history or the future, I guess, ultimately in live time because they can create the stimulation, some sort of stimulating event, and the monitoring of people, they can kind of guide the response, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
it
how many
seems like to be the
people
whole process.
and how many people have background in there are terms for it when gunfire causes blood spatter or etc. Most people don't have expertise in that. What they know is from what they've seen in a detective show.
Like
Or maybe
forensics.
forensics, exactly. That's the study of what happens after, something and what's remaining. But I mean, in terms of, uh, the trajectory, the dynamics of the various entry and exit for trajectories, for projectiles, what occurs with them. There are people that actually study these things. That's all they do all day. They shoot melons, they shoot metal, they shoot wood, and they study what occurs with these particular objects. And so you would have to be beyond skilled in many instances to do the things like shoot off an earlobe, etc. You'd have to be extremely skilled, and the wind would have to go. I mean, we're talking great luck for all that to happen. And depending on the so-called size of the trajectory, it would have torn off more than an earlobe or whatever. There are many instances. But in most cases, all of these events, they're staged, going as far back as you can go. Staged events cause uproar in populations because populations are not trained to think. They're trained to react. And you can go back as far as when you remember yellow journalism, so-called yellow journalism. What did they do? They used two so-called white females, teenagers, who were like, what are they doing on a boat in the first place? And allegedly they were being pawed at and molested by, they said, tawny, swarthy Mexicans and a whole bunch of other people. And this brought down the ire of the military age public and was perfect fodder for recruiting soldiers. And it became the top story through the Hearst family.
Yeah, I mean they know what they're doing, or he knows what you know he or what that thing that hurts people's. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
I
deadly.
mean,
Just to beat a competitor, he staged his own daughter's kidnapping. Of course, she was right along with them. She knew what was going on. She participated. There was no such thing as a Symbionese Liberation Army. Where is Symbian? I don't even want to know. Don't ask.
yeah, that I'm just like I guess trying to pick up the pieces of the history, I guess, to maybe see like where things are going. I don't know Because it
Where they're
seems to be like a
going,
clear pattern.
there is a pattern, and that's great that you brought that up. The patterns. There are patterns in your personal world, within yourself. There are patterns within the actions and activities that you do. And when you don't know them, someone will take advantage of them. And of course, there are patterns in the external, what they call the so-called macro world or macroverse. When you are receiving input, stimuli, know this, it is always patterned. There's nothing chaotic, there's nothing random or accidental. It's always patterned. Therefore,
Yeah.
you automatically presume that there is something embedded in it or there's an ulterior motive for the pattern. What you see is often not what you get.
So I guess when Britain was black and it got taken over or got usurped or whitewashed or what have you,
Mhm.
they called it Albion, right?
Yeah, that was one of the names before, Britain. They tell you in history that it was Britain, Albion, and then Britain. But they were factions, different factions, same families, all united, and also part of the so-called Iudemian Empire, Roman Empire.
How'd you say that? Empire?
Eudemia,
That's where you get. Is that like Edom?
like Edom, exactly.
So yeah, no, because I was looking at Sir Francis Drake. Speaking of the patterns of things with Drake, and Albion, because like I think they said, well, he arrived to North America and the West Coast in like 1579,
Mm-hmm.
and they said he declared, this to be New Albion from that point on, and I don't know, I was just looking at the old maps and stuff, and I just wanted to, I guess, get down to who the characters are because it hasn't changed, right? Because it's all bloodline, so it's just the same. You're dealing with the same players, kind of in a sense.
You have, and we must be on some kind of wavelength because I'm actually putting together, um, I guess you can call it a so-called hierarchy map. And this one, it goes beyond what you were shown in that so-called pyramid of control that was put out into the public lexicon some decades ago. You probably remember it. At the top was, I forget, but it's this pyramid, and at the bottom are the people. Well, it's kind of sort of accurate. That's deliberately done. They're going to put in a little bit of truth and mix in, of course, the distraction and the lies, and that causes confusion. But at the very, very so-called top, and there really is no top. If you notice the pinnacle of these so-called triangles or pyramids, the top is the capstone, and that has to be reserved for those who have been elected, literally by all the factions that have control over the election process or have a say in the election process. Don't get it twisted. It's not like the voting that you're used to, although those are devotees. But at any given moment, one could take over the other. They're not all unified and kissy kissy. They're only kissy kissy and unified because it's a protocol and they have directives. They're just not your friend or your ally or anything else that's safe and beneficial to you. So at the one near the top would be literally four so-called witches.
And that would be a wizard, I guess, right? As for men, right? Because I've always heard that wizards are just a male witch.
Actually, a priest would be a male witch.
Okay, so I guess that's why you got such a concentration of spiritual magic or witchcraft and out of the Vatican because of the
Well, look at
concentration of
the
priests.
typical liturgy. The typical liturgy is, transmutation, transfiguration. You're turning wine into blood, or whatever, supposedly symbolically. There's a lot going on there with that in itself. And then converting the wafer into flesh. You're doing it in a cauldron, or in this case, a goblet. And then through the goblet, goblets are used for many reasons, ceremoniously or ceremonially, and often to send out a message to all those who participate in it of a coven or a union. Otherwise, they're there to distribute poison.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like I was saying, bringing it back to, I guess, the Nuremberg thing. I was looking at the accounts of Nuremberg, and they were saying that like people's houses had like silver columns and crystal columns and everything. Seems like everybody had mastered some level of witchcraft, or what you call magic or witchcraft today.
Mm, the distribution of wealth in particular periods of the so-called past, totally not like today. There is no distribution of wealth. What you think of as wealth is just a pecking order showcasing. And how can you prove that? I could be a racist, so-called Caucasian, living in Bryn Mawr. I think that's an area you might be familiar with in your vicinity. And or what's the other place? Stratford. And I have a manor. Now, unless I'm direct bloodline, I'm low on the totem or low on the courtyard. And so anything can befall, and usually does, and there's no outlet, there's no safeguard. If you haven't done what you are supposed to with your so-called wealth, then you're going to just fall. But those who are within the upper strata, they seldom fall, regardless. They're literally, I guess, Teflon. If anything is said or done about them in the public eye, so-called public eye, that's just another party, another faction doing something against them, and it's just a game. They're not going to serve any time in anything, like a punitive situation. They might have to allegedly pay a penalty, a fee, but that's about it. However, those lower echelons, that's all showcasing, because they can succumb to the same thing that the so-called poor can succumb to. They just have buffers. That's what money sets up, buffers. It keeps you away from all those who you don't want to be associated with, whether that be regarding race or so-called economics or so-called class. It keeps you away from them. It stops the system from imposing certain rules on you, so you might get nice treatment from police. You might not have to walk down the city streets. You might have a chauffeur. You might be able to access places where you will never have to rub elbows or touch the so-called working classes, like your country club or your gym or restaurants. That's the buffer that money supposedly gets, and it's showcased because everybody wants those buffers. That's why people get into sports. That's why people get into so-called rap. That's why people get in. They want that buffer. And so the showcasing is put there for that purpose. And I'm not going to use the word psychology, but the experimentality of it all has been studied and known that those who get caught up in that pursuit will do anything to anyone around them to get it and keep it. So they never have to worry about that. And the same thing applies for, people in the military. They're not getting showcase trinkets. They get a little poultry, some might get a little button and a star, but they'll kill someone they never met before.
Yeah, I mean, people will do the most for the least. It's where it's at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's been that way for a while.
Yeah, this is nothing new.
But,
These are not innovators. Another thing to always keep in the brain, in your data banks. These are not innovators. These are thieves. These are copiers, usurpers. Obviously so, because if they've tainted and contaminated so-called history or past events, then they've contaminated through their scholars, through the people they pay, because you have to be a whore to do that. You know, a true individual, regardless of their gender, would say, no, I'm not taking this on. Well, it usually never gets to that. And when it does, it's rare, but it usually never gets to that. Those who take on these projects, these efforts, they already know what they're getting into and they willfully and gladly do it. So it's not about, you know, someone coming to a crossroads or getting into a dilemma and saying, oh, what do I do? I've been offered this great sum of money to doctor this or alter this or vaccinate these people. What do I do? No, it never comes to that, because as I said at the beginning, these individuals are investigated when they're not bloodline. They know exactly what's going on. They go back to, you know, they know if your grandmother was a virgin, when she married. They find out everything they can because they can, through their means. And then those are the people that get these positions. You don't want to be those people. If you find that that's what you are, then you need to out yourself so that the rest of us knows that you are a whore.
So I guess that was the whole point of getting the knowledge, though, is so you could have people that are into so-called metaphysics that were on the side of the parasite.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And it's not like someone's pushing them or pulling them. The only people you might have to push and pull, and it doesn't take that much push and pull or twisting, are those who have served some time and or done something, you know, like a little dalliance that they don't want known. And for example, we got a lot of YouTubers that just come out of the blue and they have 1 million followers or thousands, or usually it's scraps. It's like 50,000, 100,000 maximum. And they're okay with that because they're getting their little paychecks. But if you check their background, a lot of them are ex-military, a lot of them are ex-cons. And they will spout the rhetoric and come down on anyone who speaks truth if they ever do, you know, some type of interview, or they'll just talk crap, or they'll just act as the distractions that they're hired to be.
Well, this kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, that TikTok was, they really wanted to control TikTok because the algorithm was different, where you had to compete with people that had no followers, whereas all the other ones are subservient to those that already have a great reach. So like you could put something up, I mean, up until now, you could have posted something on TikTok and maybe you have a chance to get in the suggested pages or suggested to people in the algorithms. But so it forced people with big followings to have to, you know, they had to compete for a viewer base. Whereas YouTube, Instagram, all of the main, you know, all the meta ones and the NSA ones, they all, you know, they're just subservient to the, you know, your main channels, the big channels, and then everything is, you know, it's like a feedback loop with that. So there's no competition, and you can't just start right now. If you was to start, it's already like, it's like trying to get into anything that's already passed or something. You know, like it's a market that's already dried up.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Unless you're gonna just you know, you're gonna just be shaking your ass or something like that, something really dehumanizing and objectifying, then maybe you got a chance, but then you're gonna lose some you on the way.
Well, that's a vintage tactic, and it goes back far. You know, some of the famous people who, you know, for those who have read, allegedly, again, doctored history possibly, Livia Drusilla should be a name that raises eyebrows for some listening. The wife of so-called Augustus Caesar. She was known to do that just to mess up his game. She would literally go out and pay for something, you know, like a house or whatever, for a bunch of poor people, get them off the streets or help them with their businesses, or just to do something to get on his nerve. Or she'd fund a rally during an event like Liberalia, you know, when people are supposed to be in the street fornicating and et cetera, et cetera. That's where liberty comes from. And she would deliberately pay off a bunch of protesters just to F with him, as they say. But did he care for these people? No. It's like George Soros funding BLM. Did he care for him? No, he didn't care. It's just it's entertainment. So when they made TikTok, when those researchers, programmers, etc., created TikTok to F with YouTube and its owners, DARPA, Meta, etc. Their little game. It was just done for fun. They didn't care about the people and the messages, but if you were smart, you took advantage of it and you
Yeah,
put
that's
out
what I
your
mean.
message.
Not,
Yeah,
but that window is closed though.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I wanted to ask you about like, because I think it always boils down to American history. I really always want to get like the true American history, because we're not getting it obviously. And I wanted to ask you like who the Phoenicians are, like, are the Phoenicians and the Jesuits the same? It's like, is Canaan, Phoenicia, and the Jesuit, like, is it all one?
No, pardon me. Ooh. So-called Jesuit order comes out of the worship of the princes, various princes, and one of them Asus, and another, the latter that you know of as Jesus. So these would be in fact, it was called the Order, I think, the Order of Jesus, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And no, they came well after any so-called Phoenicians. Um, and they were like a secret guard. They were there to spy, get into places and create havoc, get wealth, obtain wealth, whatever means necessary. So they were trained spies, no different than any other trained system of spies. And
I was just wondering if it was a bloodline, like if it was like if it's the Canaanite or the Canaanites, the Phoenicians that established
I
the
see.
Jesuits.
Okay, I hear what you mean. No, I would not say that they were the ones who established the Jesuit order. Um, Jesuit orders more than likely came from various bloodlines, but those who are ambitious and opportunistic. And of course, with anything that's going to be well funded, you're going to have people within the same family opting, like you mentioned earlier, nepotism. And yeah, from that, you can create an order within an order. Like someone getting their cousin into the post office, and then this person, and then their sister, and then their grandmother, and their next door neighbor who's married to their cousin, and then before you know it, you're the postmaster, and that whole doggone location is just family.
Yeah, yeah. So, but isn't that how it was always going to be though? I guess ultimately, like with families, like with bloodlines, like certain bloodlines were crafted to be in positions of power, and their children would take over.
Extremely astute question, because that is exactly right. When you boil it down, it comes down to the basic unit. That basic unit is the family. Hence the reason why the family structure is targeted. If we can stop the individuals from making families, we can stop all these other things from occurring, or we can control family order, or we can get in and control the unit of family. Yeah. Well, family is where it all starts, and it spreads from there. I recall going into some office, won't name what type or where or what, and the woman that was there had a meeting with. Um, she was on the phone with another individual who was supposed to be at the meeting, but they were going to do a phone conference instead because they were stuck in traffic or something like of that nature. And so he asked me my name and then says, you look like you're from such and such a place. And then she says, you remind me of someone from this place. Are you Sephardic? Something to that effect. And so I just said, I don't know what you mean. And then she says to the person on the phone, this is going to be perfect. I think he's one of us.
Hmm.
So I had to ask her what she meant by that later, and then she really didn't go into it. She just beat around the bush. But I knew what she meant. I just wanted her to come out and say it. So this is done a lot. It's done all over the place. There's nepotism, there's endogamies. This is done all the time.
Is
And
there
it's,
so is there a good way to do it?
well, obviously, it's part of growth. If you want, if I should put it like this, it's a sign of the imbalance when things are out of order, when things are discombobulated. Because when there is order or balance and harmony, you don't have to resort to that type of thing. Obviously, because all things are equal across the board, and there's no encroachment by those who are not supposed to participate in the region where you're participating in. So there's no need for that. The only reason to do that is because you have excess amount of communication and truly so-called lower amount of resources. But this plane, this realm, was designed for self-replication and abundance. So as I mentioned before, or time and time again, all sentients who permit, that would include everyone, anyone to put a meter on that which is natural needs a kick in the butt, because this is unnatural. So there's no need for nepotism. There's only need for nepotism and endogamies and all of that stuff when you're in a realm that is under market control, that has been militarized and weaponized. That's the only reason why. But other than that, you mentioned about places of silver and opulence, and every single home all equally opulent. Well, that could be the case where everyone, even the builder who built it, is living in opulence, because there's abundance for everyone. There's no such thing as poor, and you don't have to kill off a lot of people in order to gain that, because there's abundance for everyone. And the only competition is a healthy competition and a lighthearted competition in order to bring camaraderie. It's not competition over the resources or competition to hoard and take more than your share so that you have more in perpetuity, or that you can so that you can control other groups with your control over resources.
Yeah, it's like competition just to make each other better.
Right, exactly. No differently than how you work out to improve and increase your stamina, your strength, and your posture. You're not there to harm or take away or impose some type of taxation on someone or yourself. No, you're there, as you said, competition for a holistic purpose.
So, I mean, I guess like, I'm just trying to figure out the pattern so that I can kind of, I guess, get more, clarity on my own patterns and what we're facing as a collective. Because like in the book of Enoch, it says like the angels were sent to Tartarus.
Correct.
So is there a collapse and then Tartaria is just the angels taking over?
There are some who claim that the realm is operated and, in a sense, owned by certain angels. So remember you talk about that capstone of the pyramid, the four witches just below who? Below whom? The so-called angelic controllers. And if you actually connect so-called dots, you'll start to see that the co-creators, the workers, if you want to call them that, the watcher workers, who help to manifest the various realms as they came and went through what you'd call time or periods. You could classify them as so-called angels, not originators or creators, but angels, but with the power of knowledge, deep knowledge, beyond ancient knowledge. And of course, you can spread things in a so-called egalitarian sense amongst all, or you can spread it with a sense of adversarial purposes. So I'm going to show my peeps over here in this region because I'm over this region, and I'm going to show all of them the following thing, and I'm going to show them how to take over this region when they want to. So what kind of angel is that? Angel wars.
So they work with each other, or just with the Aboriginals.
Or you can force. Yeah, well, everyone was manipulated. So this is something that's done, and it's not so-called human nature. It's programming. You see this a lot in sexism against males, primarily, where a male who is like the one who is allegedly the so-called shooter. No one goes in depth depends on, if he's Aboriginal, they're not going to go anywhere. They're just surface and he's evil. But for males, for the most part, no one goes into their past to see, okay, this is what made them, unless, of course, there's an agenda behind it in the first place. They want him for something, like that so-called ex-military guy who strangled and killed a young man on a train, or Jeffrey Dahmer or any of the others. But for the most part, no one goes in depth. They just assume a male is evil, and that's just the way it goes. But usually females are given the benefit. They go in the back of their history book and say, okay, she was molested or she was harmed, and so she was abused, so there's a reason for her being the way she is today. Well, the same thing applies to on a different scale. When you look at it in the sense of these people, if you want to call it these people, or a people rather, and let's just say there is no such thing as a white race, so everyone get your emotional side and keep it where it belongs. There's no such thing as a white race. There's no such thing as a black race. But if you automatically say everything that's white is inherently evil, no matter what, no excuse, it just comes from evil, it's just evil, that's no differently than, just being a misandrist, sexist against males, saying that, all males are rapists and they're evil and they're wicked and blah, blah, blah. They have to have a background too. But yes, there are those who come here with an agenda and they truly are wicked to the core. They're probably not what you think they are. And this goes across the board. You can find all types of so-called individuals. That's the whole nature of this thing, to hide amongst sentience, and you don't know who's who. Just have to be careful who you mate with, as I said before. But you look at it in terms of that, and then of course you look at it in terms of reality. Just because you have a background and your background is full of strife does not give you the reason nor the excuse to go and manifest more strife, more chaos. You have an obligation to come out of that. But you can manifest a bloodline pattern. It's not your core, but it's a bloodline pattern, and that will permeate all those offspring that you make. And I'm referring not to just males, I'm referring to females too. So you have to be wary of that as well. You can manifest something that is a semblance to a core, but it's not your core. The core is neutral, and it comes before bloodline. It is attached to bloodline. If it was part of bloodline, everyone would be screwed.
So is there like different brands of cores?
No, the core is who you truly are, and it can go through many manifestations as you go through, your so-called family line.
But like the core of one person might have a different nature than someone else's, or they all have the same nature?
No, they're all different. Everyone is obviously unique. And as you proceed through, let's say a woman is, I don't know, can you say the word anymore? I don't really go into that, but I've heard a lot of people saying really childish, juvenile things. Someone was unalived or they got R'd. What? Stop. The word is rape, and it's a crime. It's horrendous. It's an abomination. Say it. Okay? If you can say nigga and not have a problem with it, and you can say all these other words, I think that was what happened with the banning, and I better watch my mouth because I'm on your channel. That's right. I think because I said the K word, that's what got it banned. You can say N all day, obviously, because that's the agenda right now. You can say that anywhere, everywhere, and you're not going to get in trouble for it. But you better not say the K word, or, that might cause problems. So I think that's what happened. And I was using that as an example, which is part of the Bill of Rights. Not the Constitution, but the Bill of Rights. But as a so-called Aboriginal, I can also use the Constitution because I am privy in it and I am party to it based on the so-called 14th Amendment. So I could use both. But using the Bill of Rights, which is what everyone should, if you're going to quote that document, just use the Bill of Rights. And based on that, I could say certain words, but people are afraid to do that. You don't get it. You're setting yourself up with a pattern, and those who come after you are going to be gagged by what you don't do in this day right now.
I guess I'm just asking, like the differences in the core, like the nature of a person's core, like because like you were saying, some people are just spirits, and some people are actual souls or soul bearers.
Mhm.
So like the nature, the likeness of their core, it has to be something different, or there would be no distinction, right?
Right, of course. And so that makes you wonder, does every sentient spirit body or soul body have a core? I think that the spirit body is more fragmented and more vulnerable to input and influence because it is a mix. It's a hybrid. And
A mix of what, animal spirit, or what are you saying?
exactly, because you can mix someone with so-called races, and as long as they're not mixed with animal spirit, it's not going to affect that core.
Because
The
the core,
core,
like you said, the core is unchanged, and you're gonna have to have some type of so-called crossbreeding in order to avoid inbreeding. So it's gonna be some
exactly,
differences. But
exactly. Now you're using logical thinking. Exactly.
but if you start to breed with something that's chimeric in the sense that it's from other
Correct.
species.
Exactly. Out of alignment with the the designated bloodline that you are supposed to and sanctioned to interbreed with.
So
Outside of
so
that, you're not supposed to.
so when you're crossed like that, you have like the animal spirit is designated or has an affinity with this place. But if they're crossed, then another part of them has no affinity. Like they're not of this world. They're from something more
Well,
real,
are
I
you
guess you could
referring
say.
to so-called Nephilim?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, however, yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of different terms. Rephaim, Nephilim. I've heard of a lot of different angelic terms, and then I don't. When it comes to these other angels, like, are all the angels nefarious or malevolent? Are they all that way? Like, seems to be that there's some that might not be that way as far as the scripture is concerned. So, I just want to know, like, what is the nature of them, and what's the distinct differences in the likeness of this core? Like, if we're talking about these angels came and fell, like in Enoch, and they went to Tartarus, and then Tartarus was widespread across the world. What is the nature of that angel, and what is it? Was there an angel order already established prior to that had a different origin or a different core to
Well,
them? And like,
let's address your first question in regards to that mixing and the hybrid and who was here, etc. So using those terms you mentioned, Rephaim, Nephilim, they would have something other to say. They would oppose that they're not from here argument, or that they couldn't mate with that which is here. Obviously, different so-called blood, obviously, and more than that, disobeying a prime directive. Because if they are the ones who manufactured, or if you want to call it that, or manifested through the design plan implemented by the grand architect, then they would have to have been here in the
yeah,
whatever the so-called here is. So yes, they were here before so-called mankind, and human. They were here
that's
before.
why I always, yeah, that's why I always hear that they'll never be forgiven. The one, I don't know if this is widespread against all angels that come in the physical form, but I've heard this. They're not forgiven because they already had a relationship or connection with the creator, like kind of like the Lucifer analogy. Like Lucifer's created, Lucifer already has this understanding, and for Lucifer to go against that understanding is like tenfold disobedience.
In regards to that adversarial setup, that actually was input into the discourse. And in some of my lectures from the past, I wanted the listener, the learner, to recognize the type of so-called thought that not necessarily transcends so-called sentient thought, but differs. It's a separate path. If you were to see it, witness it, experience it without your emotion, without your sentient programming, how would you see it? Would you see it as harsh, indifferent, cold, vehement, evil? Or would you see it as some type of true structured logic based on a way of manifesting reality, dimensions, all at once in thought before action occurs? So that those who are caught up in low grade, low level emotional thought, the result of indoctrination, over mommying, whatever, and lack of courage to learn and know, they would see it as adversarial. They would see it as something wicked, as opposed to, oh, wait, let's see if I can step outside of my so-called self or so-called thinking as far as I can go and recognize what I am witnessing or reading or seeing, experiencing, and see that these so-called entities came from the same source that you come from. In whatever way you want to see it, directly, indirectly. They came from that same source. You are here, therefore you are allowed to be here, wherever here is. They are allowed to be wherever here there is as well. You have a purpose, just like they have a purpose. So are they fulfilling a purpose? Are we fulfilling a purpose? So you don't see it in terms of adversarial nature. You don't see it in terms of the concepts and the dogma that have shaped and fueled and funded religions and cults and so
I think,
politics.
yeah. I mean, it just seems like it is kind of along the lines is the same thing as like as the scripture where where some scripture says that the angels there's no they're not granted any form of forgiveness, or they can't get out of this situation that they've been condemned to. So I because like if a spirit is or spirit body is trapped in this place and just infinitely incarnating in this place, it's kind of like this is the only body that would be available to a fallen angel, or what we're calling a demon or a fallen angel, because it's just, what other form could they take? They couldn't take the form of something that could leave this place, because they wouldn't match it, right?
Well, you have to wonder, looking in that scenario, why would a creature, an entity, a being, obviously of some type of power, want to remain within the so-called physical realm unless one has been totally captivated and immersed by the allure? Do you recall when I talked about allure? And I don't know if you were there last Wednesday when I talked about the allure of nature.
I feel like we've had the discussion privately.
We did. The allure of nature can do things to you too. We respect it, just like you respect the taste of your tongue, the taste sensations and such. You respect the sensations of sex, but you don't get caught up in them. You know what they're there for, and that's it. You don't take them out of context. Out of context, you live for them. They now possess you. So an angel, so-called angel, getting getting captivated and caught up in that allure of this realm, and it's very alluring. It can be represented in literature in words by such things as, what did we associate with allure and beauty? Woman. So if I wanted to put that in words so that sentience could readily comprehend it, I would say that the sons of the Eloha, the sons of the Hayahaya, the sons of the Ishi, Lord God, fell for
And this is
the allurement of the sentient female and took them as wives. So when you take something, you possess it, and then it possesses you. So the land you're on possesses you, just like you possess the land. So you're possessed by your possessions. So they became possessed by the euphemisms, if you want to call it that, of this realm and the beauty of this realm. And so we associate beauty with female, the nature of female, the female energy. So they became allured by that, and possibly by the allure of their own efforts, the things that, you build something and you just like, and you just stand there and you're just allured and captivated by your accomplishment, as opposed to moving on. Moving on is not abandonment, it's literally moving on. The builder, having built, moves on and builds again, or goes on
yeah.
to
I mean,
something other, or rests.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I get it makes to if you have eternity or even if infinity. I mean, it seems like you'd want to still at least move forward. I mean, maybe even more so if you have infinity, because you can. I feel like as soon as you start trying to do the same thing or get lost in something, then you're going to just keep going around the racetrack. But
It's the
I
reason
ask, I
why
get,
we have Shabbat. It's the reason why we fast. It's the reason why, according to the so-called time frame of so-called creation, there was a re-energizing or so-called stoppage or work stop. Okay, everybody, rest, take a break. And now look at what we've done, and don't relish in it, but recognize and maybe work on perfecting if perfecting is necessary. I think perfecting is something that is in a sense universal. We all want to perfect what we have, that has come from our hands and our brains. So that was the purpose of resting, or maybe not even that. Literally pulling yourself away from it. Don't even think about that. It's so-called Saturday. So-called Saturday. Why are you thinking about work? Work is not on your brain. Your family is on your brain. Your knowledge and acquisition of more knowledge is on your brain. Your re-energizing, your recharging is on your brain. You're checking out your patterns and seeing which has to be eliminated and which should be enriched, if you will, or refined. That is on your brain. Not, okay, work and what can I do, or how can I catch up on work, or how can I make a little extra money. That's the whole purpose of stopping. And everyone is in violation of that. All of these nations, I'm living in a nation, you're living in a nation that violates one of the principal prime directives, and that's what you do to the land. The land is supposed to be given what is called, as they say in the book of Yashir, a jubilee, where you stop and debts are forgiven. So no planting, no growth. Nothing, well, there's growth, but it's a natural process. You've laid your cover crop.
what do they call that
Nothing
year? Every 7 years, right? Every 7 years.
every 7 years. And that
They,
has not been done. So you see all of these so-called nations violating it clearly. These are the heathen nations, if you want to call it that. I'm not using it in the adversarial sense, but these are the heathen nations. The troglodyte, the wicked, has the world in its grasp. And so it's violating everything, even the design, the natural formation, the mechanism that you call nature. It has violated nature.
I guess that's how you get the false expansion by trying to bypass that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how
It,
things look stronger than what they are.
Exactly. And it maintains what you call these various systems. It maintains the so-called supply demand chain, the low supply, the high demand, the so-called economy, the monetary, the mammon, as they say in the so-called apocrypha. It maintains all of that just by that one little act of violating a prime directive of, hey, stop, 7 days, rest, 7 year, rest, break, no touch
What do they
this.
call it?
Just
A Shemitah year or something? I forget what it's
exactly.
called.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's how you get the birth rate. You study the birth rate in a certain way as well. Because
Correct.
people think
And
that,
that,
yeah.
pardon, that is what also manifests fragmented cores in spirit bodies and also breaks down the lineage and bloodline of soul bodies by doing the same thing. You should know exactly when to mate. And I don't mean just because the sun is high or it's 12 noon, whatever, you know, and that's important too. There are rhythms and patterns and clocks and everything. So the timing for mating purposes is violated. The timing during a particular year when you shouldn't be mating and should be mating is violated. That's why you just, people are churning out babies as if they're churning out pizzas in a pizza shop.
So it just becomes obvious, I guess, like as far as like if you're just staying true to your will and you're just doing everything you can to stay, in good graces with your will, from day to day. If you were to come across an opportunity to create in that manner, it would just be obvious. I guess it would, and I guess it would happen on all levels. It would be like security, um, maybe financially as well. All of the different levels would that would just show itself in that opportunity. I guess it would just be obvious instead of trying to uh, like kind of like coerce yourself or like contrive a creative process and have a child like that. I guess that's how
Also,
accidents are happening because a bunch of people are born that were not supposed to be born at those times and stuff.
and accidents are for children. Pun truly intended. Adults are not supposed to have accidents. You're not forgiven for the things that you do. You are negligent. We are negligent in the things that we do that we call accidents. There's no accidents when it comes to the so-called adult mind, brain rather. Children can have accidents because they're children, but adults, no. You have acts of willfulness, you have acts of negligence. You
Yeah.
could tell that something should or should not be done before it's done. And that is the ultimate. So I don't say people are accidents. That's the ultimate, if you want to call it cop out, ultimate lie. To even say that to someone or imply it, as a parent, that that calls for a slap in the face. But I'm not saying people should do that. I would literally, if you want to, you can slap someone in the face without touching them, literally like walking away from them and letting them know that is something that is beyond hurtful and that you focus and contemplate that when they leave here, that's the first thing that will be brought to their attention during their judgment, because you don't tell someone that they were an accident or even
Yeah.
imply, even by implication, you don't say that. It's
And
not
people say,
true,
oh,
first of all.
say you weren't planned and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's saying you were an accident. So, whether using subtext or double speak, whatever, or synonyms, paraphrasing, it's still the same and it should not be done. You tell a child, listen, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. However, we knew what we were doing. And here you are. So the fact is, did we want you or not? And I could say I probably didn't. That's being honest, and they're never going to say that. Very few say that, to be true and honest to their adult children or whatever age of child. Very few people say these things. So-called parents say these things, like I didn't want you. It's not that you were an accident. No, it can't be an accident because I knew what I was doing, and so did the mate. He or she knew what they were doing. But the fact is, did you want? No. Because after I thought about it and the bills came in, I realized I didn't want this. That's not an accident. That just means literally you were selfish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just ask, I guess, about the angelic thing because it seems, I guess, that's been the age old fight, right? I mean, it seems like you've had um, your Aboriginals, your Autochthonous people throughout the world, and then I guess you've had some intrusion that happened, or somebody going jumping the line or getting out of order, and I guess like just looking from like my own self investigations, I'm just like, man, me being a fallen angel or having that uh, within me. I'm just like, man, is this the case for all of them? Are they all going through like the same things I went through, or are they all coming from calamitous unions, or are they? Is it always confusion? Do some of them know who they are? Or are they all just, I guess, just programs just being run, just on? And because I just don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out the nature of of uh of a soulless vessel, and then the nature of a soul, and like the contrast, like what in the likeness, like things that I guess you could tangibly point to, and things that like are telltale signs. And like, is it always just universal? Are all fallen angels like the same? Or are they all going to be having similar upbringings and similar scenarios? Like, I just, I think I don't know enough people that have done the investigation that are from my ilk, I guess, to where I could bounce these ideas off them.
You see a lot of these particular so-called hybrid angelic bloodlines in so-called entertainment and in places of so-called seats of so-called power or decision. And that's because one of the purposes of being here is to attract and mislead. You have to, I always go to the core of everything and everyone. So you ask yourself, now I don't have to, but I know, and this is what I'm saying to you, you should ask yourself, well, why is the originator, the creator originator permitting this? Why is this permitted, period? Why was it permitted from the start? Why not stop it? Why not stop so-called angels from mating with so-called sentients so that this could all be avoided? Obviously, it was permitted.
How did they get their foot in the door? I guess is like kind of like what I want to know, and is if there was always just like a ratio on the earth. Like if you think there was an angelic order, a physical angelic order here that was established before man and
Yeah,
man got here. Um,
you would have to
would
be
it?
here if you're the worker, the construction site workers. I'm just using the analogy so you get an idea, not an image, but if it helps to comprehend this. The construction worker obviously is there before the occupant of the building. The building owner is there just to make sure everything is being done right and, say hello to the work teams or work crews for, morale's sake, whatever, talking to engineers, etc., and looking at blueprints. But the workers are there first. So if you want to equate the workers with the so-called angels, obviously they were here. And where are they living? Are they living flying up and down in their ships? Or are they just living in the realm if they had to take on physical formats in this realm? There are laws
Are,
in every realm. And in this realm, certain physical things are required. So, and that's not to say that they were two arms, two legs, or maybe they're humongous giants, who knows? But in this place, with the laws of this realm, obviously they had to come into some form that they were allowed to come into. And then when the construction ended and the place was ready for the first occupants or second occupants, did they leave or did they stay? Let's use some type
authorities?
of, I think they were supposed to stay. I'm quite sure they were supposed to stay, and not just for the first occupants, if you want to use first come, first serve occupants. I think there were certain simultaneous occupations and everything within its own realm so that it can
So,
grow.
so angel was
And
like a coach almost.
yeah, like a coach, if you want to say that, and then
No,
assisting
no, I was
and
gonna say
showing.
like a coder. Like if they're part of the construction, were they like
Yeah.
a coder? Were they like a coder or something? Like what would how could you relate that? Like
Well, if we're looking at
the
it in
assistant.
the virtual sense, a coder is someone who manifests code along with other members of a team, and they work together, each one having their own modules or whatever the terminology is to work on, but for the purpose of manifesting an app that does particular functions and has particular features. So yeah, you can equate it with that. And
Uh,
they're supposed to be here because there's always maintenance necessary, changes, etc. But if an order is given, hey, stop. But what about when this breaks down? Let it break down.
so the hedge of protection gets removed at different times to just to I guess to just to test people's will or to because I guess that's the only way the will can really be fully realized.
The will can be realized, and the purpose of knowing and purpose of being can be recognized and respected or not. So you notice that when there is turmoil in in the realm where we live, catastrophe, some change, some humble, some do it temporarily, and then they go right back to arrogance and deceit and all the other vices. But some just change. Some have that not just an aha moment, but that moment where it's a convergence point, and they realize that path is not the path. So what's the difference between the
Yeah.
two? Will.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were saying like I remember one time I asked you and you asked me if I had a self.
Hmm.
Or something along those lines. And I'm just, I don't know if it's because of the fragmentation or what, but um, that's why I'm just trying to figure out the nature of the angel and the fragmented angels, and then and then I guess we're saying that these are the original angels we're talking about, and then we're talking about these angels came into form with something that is part animal and part man or part human.
Well, the so-called angelic realm never changed. It's still the same. According to certain scribes or scholars, there were 22 that manned the helm of the so-called insurgents, mutiny, so-called. Again, this is said and done and written for the purposes of the sentient so that they can comprehend certain things, not that it was actual. And then, of course, you add the 200 that went with it, and they occupied certain parts of the realm, certain mountains, because they did not want to go any lower. The lower you go into the realms, the more of the lower nature you succumb to. So you can stay elemental in the heights of mountains or in the depths of certain types of caves. But you take on that which is based on the law, based on the law of, let's say, the fathoms, the depths of the ocean, you can have bioluminescence. You can have certain size of eyes based on the laws of that realm. So the higher you are, the lower you are, you have to obey the law. You have to take on a particular form. The higher you are, the more elemental you are. So you wouldn't even recognize a so-called angel. It would look in the form, it might look like a rock. it might emanate, literally emanate a high amount of radiation that would kill instantly.
So it stay like, by and large, I guess, would you say like they stay in like a more plasma form?
I don't know if they were in any type of plasma form, but I do know that elemental forms, because we are in a realm of elements. Elemental forms are definitely, we are elemental, you know. But they were in a particular elemental form while here, but manifesting when they had to manifest, to bring about what we see, what we experience. This goes more, this is deeper, if you want to call it that, or more profound than just our very nature, our sensual experience. Obviously so. There's got to be a lot of inner workings and outer workings going on so that all of this can operate and function and that we can sense it. We sense it according to the laws based on what we are and how far we want to go through those areas, or maybe even test the boundaries of. But within the scope of our existence, we see things a certain way, we smell things a certain way, some more than others, we taste things a certain way, some more than others, but they're still bound by those laws. As I said, you take it as far as you want to take it. You take on the consequences. Some use ayahuasca, some use whatever, LSD, to get beyond those boundaries. And there's consequences to that.
Yeah, no, I've always heard of people saying that's like they're going through the back door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are realms that the average, not average, but the regular sentient brain is definitely ill prepared for. They wouldn't even know what the preparation is for that. There is a preparation for that. You ask a true shaman, they would tell you that it takes, or at least for most, it took years to prepare, to not only know how to meander in those realms, but also to act as a guide for those who are foolhardy enough to want to go into those realms. But a true shaman would not allow it. A true shaman would not take someone into those realms. So what does that say? A lot of these individuals, whether Ecuador, Peru, wherever, they're doing it for the money. Most, if they're true, they would take on someone as a student, and you would gradually work your way up to or through to the testing ground where you're able to take on these so-called substances. It's not just something, that's why most people, they just go through a trip, not realizing when you go into a realm, you take back from a realm. And a lot of them have things on them, burdens on them, parasites on them that they foolishly allow to infest them, innocuously so. Yeah, so it's not something you play around with. Most of the time they have no idea what they're on, and usually they spread it to someone, because as anything that's parasitic, the initial host is not the target.
Yeah, it's just the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to, I guess, figure that out as far as this age-old thing, like as far as the war on this realm. It seems like it's just been constant, huh, between those that are, I guess, controlled or subjects to the angels, and then those that are actually um, autochthonous and aboriginal to this world. It seems like that's been the crux of the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of wanted to know the differences, and if there's ever been any harmony between the two, and if there was ever a place for the angels to exist physically here, like if there was ever any place for them to be, and like if there's any like natural ratio as far as like occupancy,
Yeah,
because
there's always a place for everyone here, as long as they stay in the place that they're designated for. We are within here's that word, discombobulated realm. and it's not accidental. This is not through catastrophe or drought, etc., or so-called economics. This is done deliberately by those who can control through the various means, and the various means being so-called spirit programming, religion, um, so-called resource management. That's a nice word for it, a term for it, and all these various ways to manipulate the minds of minions. If I can take you out of the dredges of the caves or wherever and build you up and turn you against people you don't even know, then that's power, and that's also a way to engineer the course of things to come and the course of things present. Therefore, harmony and balance and harmony comes when there's a respect for prime directives, and there's a respect for designations. Everyone was designated a spot. That has nothing to do. You'll hear it in this upcoming podisode 175. You'll hear it when I go into it deeply, that the designated areas for individuals, for groups rather, for I don't want to say tribes, but and neither will I say nations, because those are artificial. So when you hear hybrids saying they're First Nation, there's watch and listen. That is actually saying something more profound than you know. It has nothing to do with being autochthonous. It has everything to do with being recognized as a nation within the so-called angel realm, because angels set up nations within an empire. And so when they say First Nation, they mean they were slavers. They mean they were going along with the program, and they were just as wicked as everyone else who was going along with the program. So they were First Nation in that regard. And therefore, when you go against the prime directive, that which you claim to own will be taken away from you. So there's no ownership. That's where this whole ownership comes from. There's designation, and within a designated part of the realm, you do your thing. Everyone is doing what they're supposed to do within that realm. So in that sense, you could say there's a level of so-called ownership. It's not even a possession. It's occupation of a place that you are thriving. It's your niche. No one is to come in and violate it. You're not to violate anyone else's niche, and vice versa. But we're in a realm, as I said many times before, where the world is on anti-rejection drugs. A pig heart in a sentient body. It doesn't belong. And this drugging is coming to a close, in the sense that there will be a rejection, and it's occurring. Rejection causes chaos and skirmishes, etc., and turmoil. We're seeing that already. And there's power in that. Parasites gain a lot of power in turmoil, because confusion is when most make their moves. People who act in desperation are out of confusion. They do things like buy or mate or hurt
Or sell.
someone. Or sell, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I, I just, when it comes to myself, I always, I'm looking at it like, as far as the makeup of me, the things that make up me, I'm like, what is the, the nature of my core? If it's, if I'm mixed with all these things, that like fragmented things, and a lot of them are not good things, like, I guess you could say, right? Like, I mean, like, what would you need a troglodyte for?
Well, everything had its place. So the troglodyte had its place. They, according to some of the scholars, allegedly, troglodytes dwelled in caves and dwelled in forests of certain realms, parts of the realm, and everything was fine there. But when they started to over their areas and deplete it, then something in the sense of the so-called angelic intelligence, was supposed to step in. I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did step in, or they did step in, but there was some manipulation going on, and it more than likely came from sentient angle. If there's a prime directive where you are not permitted to harm your blood, but if you can do it through proxy means, then why not get a retard, pardon the terms, people, to do your dirty work? Your hands are clean, in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, if the troglodyte, like at that point, I guess the troglodyte doesn't have to. I mean, what are they just totally insulated from the communication with the other types of
No,
people and beings?
everything has a pattern of growth. So taking them outside of context, they never experienced the growth that they were supposed to have. Whether that growth is a negative growth, meaning it would implode upon itself and then be reabsorbed into what you call nature, or whether it was to come out of that. It all depends on the will. It could be the will of one that recognizes that there's potential beyond this, but you don't have to step outside your designated part of the realm to do so.
Yeah, I mean, because like if you're a troglodyte and all you know is just troglodytes and troglodyte life, and then you step out of that and you come to experience something else, I don't know how you couldn't internalize like, um, worthlessness.
Well, that's why I mentioned about so-called angelic um, input. Angelic input would either be in violation if something was meant to just go its course and, go away. You see an animal, it's injured, and along a highway, and you stop and you go help it. But how are you thinking? How are you rationalizing the situation? Instantly help it, but okay, you help it. It's a turkey vulture. You nurse it back to health. 10 months later, it flies back and it goes into the window of an oncoming school bus and causes a major accident. So were you to allow that creature that was injured, maybe you could have put it out of its misery, or you could have left it alone if you wanted to. You had a choice. You had three choices, but you chose to take it and nurture it, care for it, and repair it. You got satisfaction out of that. That's a selfish act, and did not consider, well, what could possibly occur. This is what I meant before about stepping outside of the sentient brain for even a second. It's very difficult for those that are fragmented to do so. Aboriginals have it within them, but they're very drunk, many of them, on the realm. They're by the allure of the realm and the trick of those who were savvy enough and conniving enough to lead them out of their own selves and their hierarchy. But for those who haven't, they can truly see that when you look at it in terms of pardon the term, God, you recognize there's a level of so-called thought that steps outside of what we see as thought and action. You might see, well, that's cruel, that's horrible. How can that occur? That's not a God, that's a devil. Or you're looking at it from a very small frame, a very myopic frame of mind, not brain. And sometimes you go outside of that, and how to do that is what you are to learn in your existence here. And that has been stopped along the way and diverted. The troglodyte, was it ever meant to be able to see that? Well, I think perhaps that's why various religions were used. Obviously, those religions were used for ulterior motives. Give a little intelligence, but also make a fighting machine. Make a group that will become a conglomerate in time and have within them the seeds of anger and hate against someone else who they have no clue about. So religions have a dual purpose. They're not meant to be permanent. They're adaptation food. You use whatever means to increase your intelligence and your passion to want to know and learn truth. And then once it takes you to that so-called next level, you drop it. But if someone comes in and diverts it and diverts you with it, they will put on it or impose some type of emotional gateway, like punishment, a punitive nature. If you leave the religion, you're going to hell. So they claim that's what cults do, but they all do it. If you leave the cult, this bad things are going to happen to you. We won't talk to you. We'll shun you. That's what religions do. But that's what religions do when they have been contaminated. And I think that the originators of religions, either they did so with a holistic sense in mind, but as I mentioned, they got perverted because of the input. And it would take someone who is sentient to pervert it for the purposes of manifesting a people, raise them up a nation through these various means. So not quite an ape, but sentient enough to know exactly what I'm talking about. And I can actually utilize that half knowledge to get them to do my dirty work.
And then when you get something that has been crossed with that and something else,
Mm-hmm.
what's that? Like, what is that? Like, what's the purpose of that thing?
The purpose of crossbreeding?
No, like it's something like you get that's something with the a troglodyte type thing with a half knowledge that's been weaponized, and then it crosses with something
You get
else.
you get
Huh?
mankind. You get mankind. Mankind has to have a certain diet. Mankind, and you can just stretch that out across the board. A diet of certain types of food, drink, and a certain type of activity. Just listen to. You can spot the bloodline when you hear people talk. I gotta have my meat. I gotta have steak. I need sex. If I don't do this, I'll go crazy. I have to have my
Yeah,
alcohol.
that's the thing though. Like I think logically from my experience that you would have to, if you're a new thing, that you would have to have a smaller footprint, or you should. I would think that like maybe the original people, they can dabble with all wide, a bunch of different things because they got they got the oil to process anything and everything. Whereas it feels like the person that like a graft or a big graft, I think that they would have to have a smaller footprint to try to find any equilibrium or harmony within the structure or the system. That's what I would think, because it seems like if they were pulling more resources, then that just seems like how does that make any sense? Like
When you say resources, you mean misusing and abusing the so-called realm of nature and things that fuel it and maintain it? Is that what you're referring to?
yeah, well, it just seems like if you were an angel or an angel hybrid or a troglodyte or something like that, or something that, or a hybrid, some type of
Now, there's a
hybrid of a
difference.
hybrid of a.
Right, there's a difference. You have the so-called angelic hybrid, and yes, they have mixed with a bunch across the realm. Then you have the animal hybrid. Um, and for the most part, all of these groups were maintained in particular areas. Sentience here, these hybrids here, and so forth. But obviously, someone violated that. I think it was a combo, I know it was a combo of sentient and so-called angelic for the purposes of violating prime directives without violating prime directives.
Like a bypass.
Right. You get someone else to do it and their hands are dirty and
But
they
I'm just
suffer.
saying, like, so, like, you're like when you are such a manufactured creation, or residual creation, however you want to look at it. Like,
A graft.
would would it make sense? Yeah, would it make sense to have a heavy diet, or to have the more like like what is the nature of an angel's diet, and what is the nature of like a hybrid?
Aha. Okay.
Because
Angelic diet is
Osmodeus,
minimalistic, highly
yeah,
minimalistic.
yeah, because Osmodeus, like I was reading about Osmodeus, you know, when you were putting me on to him, I was like, it was talking about he would like descend from I guess the ether, and only drank water. Like he can't. I guess he can't. That was his way to even experience for him. I don't know. That's what I was getting from the analogy, that he had a cistern that he would come down into, you know, from a different level, like lower level of the ether. He would come down into physical form and drink water, and that was like, I guess, like, I don't know if that's a guilty pleasure, like just to come into density through some water, or
No,
what. And
water,
then
drinking of the water was for electrolyte balance so that there would be balance in the time spent here. The only reason why. And of course, mineral rich water at that time, depending on the source, was all of the minerals you need. You didn't have to have any type of solid.
yeah, because the water's actually communicating back
Mhm.
everything. So a minimalistic diet is or lifestyle is the lifestyle of angelic creature.
And it all, everyone has their designated, if you want to call it diet. Most have violated or foregone and ignored, if they knew it at all, what they are supposed to ingest. And of course, you discombobulate the people and their position on the realm, within the realm. You also discombobulate the so-called sources of food, the sustenance. So, you know, you again, that should have been a huge red flag as to when you are and where you are when you noticed most of your food was coming out of China. You're
Yeah,
living in sin.
yeah, literally,
Hmm.
literally.
Correct. The average individual has no idea that China was called Sin, China. If you ever, you know, look at the Sino Wars, and in reference to so-called biblical scripture, the area was filled with people known as Sinites.
So who's Gog and Magog? Because I've always heard people say Magog is the Mongols.
Hmm. Those are part of the so-called 10 tribes of the barbarian groups. Um, as I mentioned before, Imnaya, Scythian, Gathak, Magog. These names you'll see also in the Tanakh, or so-called Old Testament. You'll see these names mentioned there as well, but you'll also see them mentioned throughout in some remnants of historical accounts where these names are used. Obviously, it's been wiped, but if you read, you'll find these names mentioned.
Well, I
And
mean, you
with
definitely
that,
get you definitely see Ashkenaz,
of
you know,
course,
and that's the same family as Gog and Magog.
it's an offshoot of that group, of that family line, that bloodline.
Because what I think the Ashkenaz comes from Gomer. Are they all
Mhm.
coming from Gomer?
No, not all. No.
Because I mean, ultimately Japheth, right? So that's what I wanted to know, I guess, as far as like who are the Mongols? If you know, Magog does sound like Mongol, but you know, obviously, if the Sinites are the Chinese, or the modern day Chinese, or
Mhm.
what, you know, what
Modern,
and they would
so-called,
call it.
exactly, so-called modern Chinese or Han bloodlines.
So it had to be some crossing there between Japheth and Canaan, huh?
There was. Obviously so. Definitely a mix of nations for various reasons, for so-called economic purposes, for building of larger factions in order to take over and encroach, again, violation, and in order to do so, pushing others out of their lands So one of the major upsets was when they invaded the Americas. And then the Americas became the land of Canaan, so-called Canaan, Canaan. And
Is
they
this
were
after?
ordered to be removed.
Is this before or after the flood?
Allegedly after.
Because I'm like this reset loop has to have to allow them to even get that kind of a toehold. There had to be something going on where things were gonna kind of reset, I guess, because it was if everybody was doing what they're supposed to be doing, it wouldn't even have been a possibility for them to penetrate something that like the people that that established all these principles that are expressed in like modern day Taoism, that
Mhm.
the Shang and everything, the people that you speak of, they had to have had such mastery in science to create to express that knowledge in the ways they did, whether it be the architecture or the books or whatever,
Mhm.
and the clothing, everything. I mean, it just seems like things had to be in a reset state in order for that type of people or place to fall to barbarous Sinites and Magog.
You think about this. Man was bestowed with knowledge that was of the almost the equivalence of so-called angels. So-called mankind and human were not.
Were angels like uh, AI kind of angel eye?
Actually, you can say that AI is backwards. It's IA.
Yeah, and they say KI in German because the word
Mhm.
for artificial is with a K. But
Correct.
yeah, so I mean, is it like that though? Is that what it was? It was like if this is a resource that
You
has been
really
bestowed.
don't want to. You really don't want to know what's up with that so-called AI, and um, you are retraining and, in a sense, helping to rekindle something that existed and was in a dormant state for a long time.
So it's like it's just you're rubbing on the genie's bottle right now.
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of the studies though, like people that learn with AI, there's no recall on what you've learned for some reason. I guess it's because it's so
It's
passive.
absorbing, it's taking from you. It's bad enough that these machines you've heard me mention this, and I think I saw a pop-up. Did that say the time is up?
I don't think the time is. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
No, no.
Okay, I don't know what that was. Okay, you've heard me mention a few times before that when you utilize these devices, when anyone utilizes these devices, there's a ebb flow. With everything, there's an ebb flow. Everything. That's one of the laws of this realm, of this existence. You take, you give, and something takes. In using these machines and now using this so-called AI, and there are various formats as the days proceed, you'll see different names for different types of escalated or changed or innovated so-called AI. Each time you use it, that's why I say don't use it. You see, the addiction has already started.
For sure. People feel like they can't compete if they don't use it.
Falling for the emotional desperation.
But like, because I've heard people say that too. Like, big tech guys saying like, I'm waiting to have kids for when the brain chips are ready because my kid's not going to be able to compete in the world where everybody has brain chips.
Mhm. In William Friedkin's book, The Exorcist, there's a line where um, I think it was one of the characters, what is his name? The character's name, it was not Marin. Oh yeah, it was Marin. He said to the other priest, Karis, the more you talk to the demon, the more it takes from you. So don't talk to it. Don't engage it. Don't ask it questions. And don't
Yeah,
believe what it says.
people are using it. I mean, I guess we've been so isolated. People are using it like a psychiatrist and a physician, a medical practitioner.
The reliance is it's to the level of endemic. It's become part and parcel a necessity, and not even a necessity. It's becoming a crutch, and then from a crutch, it will be that God grid that I mentioned in 2009 and in 1979.
So I guess, man, everybody wants to know what's the next shoe to drop. You know what I mean? Like, what is the next flashpoint?
Don't worry about these flashpoints. What you are to do is literally continue gearing up within and building community, truly community. You have to start recognizing what trust was, what trust is, and starting it with self. Most don't trust themselves, have no idea. Don't let yourself get so swept away out into those deep waters where you have no clue about the things that you are imbued with, the attributes that you are imbued with, you come here with, that you are that are natural to you. Don't allow yourself to be compartmentalized and separated so that you have to rely on something like this, as someone in the chat room put it, artificial angels.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to myself, I mean, I don't know how it is for other people, but I don't know if it's the location or what, but I just don't. I don't know. I don't know how. I
No,
don't know.
you're in a place right now where you're supposed to come out of the stupor of complacency. You are to learn how to work with your hands, build with your hands. The laziness factor, the procrastination factor. You have only a certain window to not necessarily battle against, but to overcome. And then from there, you'll find out whether or not you are to maintain that realm, that part of the realm. You are over a granite bed, and so therefore there's a protection around it automatically. And it can be part of your network of places. But that's not the place to be, because you'd have to put out the word for the spirit of mighting things, let's put it that way, to get rid of a lot of grafts around there, because they're there to maintain that place so that no balance and harmony comes to it.
Yeah, it's a lot of that. I mean, I just been, I don't know. I don't know who would really. Am I waiting for people to get desperate, or is it just gonna reach a level of desperation for myself as
No,
far
you
as
know
far as
the rule on that, what I mentioned in the past about desperation. Never move on or act on desperation. You remember the parable or the story I told about the man on the highway with the under the blinding rain,
yeah.
afraid that, if he stays in one spot, someone's going to hit him because they can't see either. So what does he do? He can't go one way, can't go the other way. At least he thinks in his own mind. So does he run out into the highway when he thinks the coast is clear? So out of desperation, he runs out on the highway and gets hit? Or does he do the wise thing and recognize there are ways out of his situation? He does not have to succumb to desperation nor act in desperation, and you should never act in desperation.
No, I
You
just
don't
mean like
want anyone who acts in desperation.
for other people, like it just seems like it would require a very desperate world for people to want to come build a community. Well, I mean, with the likes of
That's
me.
what you don't want. That's and pardon the
I definitely don't
analogy.
want that. That's definitely not the ideal
circumstance. I mean, but
at all.
I just don't know like how else it would even happen.
No, you don't want that at all. To use an old reference, you might have seen it, heard it. Some of the popular celebrities have also talked this. Aboriginal ones have mentioned about, so-called climbing to so-called success, and then once they've reached that so-called pinnacle, then out of the blue come all of these tethers, whatever, trying to get a touch. Well, and then what do? Do you bring up without the handouts? No, or do you tell them you weren't with me when I was struggling, and therefore you have no place here either? So your call. Do you do that? Or do you open up the arms and the doors like Joseph did when his brothers who sold him came into Egypt with their father? And do you do that? There's a big difference between them and others possibly. There's a reason for everything. So you have to make that wise decision. Do you want people who weren't there at the beginning or who weren't doing things on their own and proving that they were doing things in order to work towards this? Because that's what you want. You want to make those connections now before anything physical happens. Everyone's working towards that path and they're doing things where they are right now, as opposed to someone acting in desperation and showing up, hey, listen, I need some help. Just open the door. Where's your humanity? Do you shut down like the successful rapper or the successful athlete who says you weren't with me when I started, but you expect me to just open the door now? Or do you open the door using the biblical scenario of Joseph?
I mean, it don't seem like anybody's knocking at the door, you know what I mean? And it seems like the only thing that would make them do it is if, it's just massive calamity. I just don't. I feel like it's, I don't know. Maybe I just don't see it yet. But as of now, as far as my vision can go, I don't know who's really up for it, up for the task.
It's not going to happen until you build what you're supposed to build right now. So you continue building that within the reference. All things will come into fruition. That includes so-called finance. But you continue building that as opposed to waiting for the knock at the door or the email. And they will come too, but don't open up the door. Guaranteed those are not the beings. They're not ready either. They're just looking for a way in somewhere. And that will take away from what you're doing. It will distract, subtract, and who knows what else. So no. But you have to work on what you're working on right now. You've shown photos of the buildings. Those buildings have to be completed within a certain amount of time. There must be garden spaces. You must set up irrigation, whatever you're going to set up, you must do so. Learn things with your hands and they become your true skill set. You have a certain window of time to do that and no procrastinations.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the time is crunching.
Well, it's
That's
not
why
so
I'm
much
at.
about time crunching, but yes, nothing waits for anyone. And as you can see, you're in the realm of the so-called wicked. And they make changes and everyone else just comes with the scenery. So you know that that's a given. Therefore, you continue doing what you're supposed to do there. Study, prepare, build, but you don't do so. Again, you would be doing it out of desperation if you did so as using that as motivation. That's not motivation. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. Whatever the so-called they are, and we know who for the most part, the front office people and those who are in the limelight. We know some of the names, some of the institutions and concerns and nations, etc., and their so-called leaders. We know some of that, and the funders of these things. Some of those. But do they matter? No. What matters is what you're doing right now. That goes for everyone. If you build it, the hose will come. Okay. don't know about that.
Oh no.
So those are the things that you're battling right now: procrastination and the combination of fear and wonder where so-called finances are going to come from. You don't worry about where finances are going to come from. You have to enterprise for that. You have various means. You've got, if you want to use the popularity factor, use that and
I
get the advertising dollars from YouTube or whoever, or, because they do obviously pay something, and then you can do that. You see the whole reason behind having skill sets now.
I mean, I've been demonetized since like 2013 or something like that. 2014. No, 2014. I think I've been demonetized for over a decade now. I don't get anything from YouTube. I
Mhm.
like. I don't know. I'm at like as far as that, man. I'm just living day to day. I don't really, I can't. It's I don't really have any. It's miraculous that I mean, because I feel like it's based on either I'm not reaching my audience, just is being suppressed my reach, or they just don't want nothing to do with me anyway.
No, people listen. Those who are truly seeking, they know. You look at what happened on the account that I utilize here. I not even able to broadcast. The only buttons available on that thing are story and post and reel, but the live button has been removed. So you see, these are all private entities, corporations, companies, and that's how they roll. That's how they work. They can silence whoever they want to silence. I don't allow them to silence me. They cannot silence me. They did not make me. And as you
Yeah.
see, we're still doing what we have to do here. We're not acting out of desperation. We're not acting out of need at all. So you continue doing what you're doing and do not let these distractions overwhelm or overtake you. Focus your contemplation, not prayer, but better than prayer. Get rid of any type of affiliations that you might have had or still have an impact on you, because those will tear you apart inside. And you'll see a huge difference. And maybe those numbers will even go up in defiance of the very algorithms themselves. They'll make you a case study, like, well, what's going on here? How is this happening?
Yeah, I mean, because last time when I was giving a lot to social media, I was getting more back from it, but it was just like, I reached. It's like they won't let me get above 13,000. It's like as soon as I hit that right there, they delete me. So it's like I don't. I'm like, and it's like weird medium right now where I don't go too far and I don't give it too much energy, but at the same time, then since it's so entertainment based, then people they're not even knowing that I exist as much as they might have. But it's it's like building on rented land.
Well, you're again, you'll hear Potasode 175 and you'll say, wow, how did I know these things? Well, there's a connection in that. But you are, in a sense, on rented land. And just keep that in mind. You know where you are, you know when you are. You are. You're on the land that has been usurped and taken over, although they don't own it, by the so-called Holy See. So just keep that in mind. You know these things, but you
Yeah, for
dwell
sure, for
overseas.
sure, for sure, all of that. But I'm saying like building something on social media is like their platform is like that's their foundation. I'm building
Yeah,
on
that's
it.
the nature of a corporation. You're in their playground. However, you can play in their playground in the sense of how you manipulate it. I won't say what, because that's the equivalent of putting a camera in a so-called haunted house. If it is haunted, they see you. Do you think they're going to go in front of the camera now? They know exactly what you do. You're putting cameras up. So we're not going to say what is going to occur. So I have some ideas that we can talk about, not necessarily on here. And those that know who are listening now, they know too, and we'll share that with those who are ready. And as for those who have reported the account, I know who they are already. They may not know that I know who they are, but I know who they are. And still means nothing. We'll continue on no matter what.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we gotta do what you got. I mean, one way or another, you know. You gotta.
Well,
I mean,
it's not so haphazard as it might seem.
if
But
it was
at the
gonna, if things was gonna collapse in a total oblivion anyway, I mean, you said I got to do the same things I would do anyway every day. I enhance my skills and learn as much as possible.
Exactly. Someone's got to make the collard greens, okay? So they're not going to cook themselves. They're not going to pick themselves.
Yeah.
So you know what to do, and you don't let anything get in front of that. That makes no sense to do that, but that is exactly the programming that you're taught from grade school, church, mosque, maybe temple, I don't know. But these are the ways of the indoctrination to make you be an animal in headlights as soon as something allegedly big happens. But the thing is, here's the insidious part of that. You're trained to want the semi or the thing that's making the headlights. You're trained to desire it. You look for that because you're also seeing it not only as the thing that stops you, but the thing that rescues you from your problems. So people are looking for an alien invasion or a war or civil war or some big act to rescue them from what they see as their burdens, their commitments, etc. Your savior, nor is it your devil. It's just a distraction, and you have power over the distraction. And the power that you exert or show is when you do what you're supposed to do, regardless, and do what you can do if something is stopping you as far as so-called finances. Without harming yourself, without harming anyone else. Never compromise truth of self or life itself. So no lying, it's not necessary. You're supposed to be an adult. You are an adult. No need to lie. First. Second, no need to harm anyone else because that's being a parasite. You're not a parasite. Regardless if you're hybrid this or hybrid that or sentient, whatever, you're all sentients, but you're not a parasite. You can become a parasite, like those ones we talked about at the very beginning. Not going to name their names, but you know who they are. Everyone knows who they are in the sense of their names, but those are parasites. In addition to others who are on so-called lower realms, they too have allowed themselves by design or by their very action to become parasites, and they relish in it. It's like being a vampire. You want to be a vampire? You want to be pimped out by the big vampire?
Who is that, man? Who is that? That's what I want. I want to know. Like I want to know the name of the source to have the right phone number to dial to, and also I want to know who what that name is, just so I can know who's invoking that.
He's on YouTube. There are many so-called vampiric groups, even literally.
Is it like Agent Smith though? It's like Agent Smith. He can come through any open vessel.
No, not to that degree. I'm actually referring to you can reach out and touch with your finger type so-called vampiric entities. They don't live on the mountaintops. These beings dwell. They might not walk the streets. They, of course, might have drivers, etc. Because again, what comes with wealth? Buffers. So obviously, they're not walking in the malls, although they might, depending on what they want to take. They might see something they want to take. So obviously, watch yourself, watch those around you, because you don't know who's looking at you when you're in these places. So just be on your best. And don't allow yourself to be pulled in by trinkets, someone promising you something. That's going to happen a lot. That usually happens in times of turmoil. The opportunistic parts of the vampire, which is a parasite, coming out in full force. You think about these so-called decades, like the 80s, from the end of the 70s into the 80s, and then part of the 90s. You had this rise of so-called skill set schools, fly-by-night schools. Get your CNA, become a nursing assistant, and all these other stuff, and become a beauty stylist, esthetician. And people went for that. Many young, so-called young people fell for it, thinking, okay, I can't afford a degree. I'm in a country that's not going to pay for a degree, not realizing they should have been enterprising, not going for a degree. But yet they wanted this fast track into access to so-called money, and getting a certificate was supposed to be the thing, and they didn't realize that it's only for some, and this sounds really twisted, but Barbizon School of Modeling only got 2 graduates that actually became full-fledged models. They were done to showcase, just like the people on the basketball court. Only one of them actually made it to some low-level end in the NBA. The rest, never. That's done to showcase. It's done to maintain the momentum, to keep the trick going, the trick and the trap. The ITT Tech. Where are these places now? Some people actually recognized it, realized, okay, I know this is a joke, but I'm going to use that as a stepping stone, because right now that's what I could afford. Can't afford a 4-year, so I'm going to use this as a stepping stone. That's using this so-called system against itself, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's why this empire is here. It's a testing ground. Be wise within it. Use it. Move on. Don't use people. Don't harm people. But use those systems for what they're worth and for the greater purpose, not for selfish reasons. Obviously, for helping yourself first, because you're supposed to help yourself first, but realizing that you're building towards community. We're in that time frame right now. It changes, goes back and forth as there ebb and flow, but right now we're in that time frame to be building self, strengthening self, and building community.
Easy. I mean, it's simply said, but it's arduous.
It's arduous. It's the most arduous part is seeing within the families, the setup for those who have families, to see if there are any who are you actually true first? And then are there any within your family that are also true? You might find none. You might find one. But regardless, if you find none or one, you're still to make that calm and tranquility within the home. You don't leave the turmoil. The turmoil might remain, but you don't become part of it, and you don't participate in it. You don't have to participate in what goes on within your household when the things in your household are destructive. Oftentimes you have to leave.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a fighting fire with fire thing. I mean, a lot of times I can't even, there's nothing I can really say. They're not listening to me anyway.
Well, you have no children, so you have no clout. If you had children of your own, this is the perverted nature, so-called nature of that mindset.
Oh, it's so crazy, man. I mean, like I was talking to this one woman about it, about having natural birth. And she's like, well, did you have any kids? I'm like, no, but I also didn't have any the wrong way either. So I don't get, how does it make you more qualified? It's like if somebody, drove a car off a cliff and they're like, you ain't never had a license. You don't know how to drive a car. But well, I never drove one off a cliff though.
Exactly. But see, that's not, you're not contending with a logical brain, and therefore there's no reason to even go toe-to-toe with it. There's no logic there. You recognize it, and you just move on
And this is
cordially.
this is the widespread evaporation of like true masculinity. I feel like, the logic is just missing.
Exactly. It's completely sequestered. So you recognize that just because family doesn't recognize you as legitimate because you're not a father paying child support and has children out of so-called wedlock, because that is respectable. I'll listen to you. You got children. You make sense. You're an alcoholic, but yet you have children, And that gives you clout, that gives you authority to talk. That's the mindset that tells you right there there's no logic.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you haven't ruined your life completely. You haven't irreparably damaged people and yourself. Oh, you don't know anything.
So what's it saying? The fact that someone has offspring, that's all that matters. So you cannot talk, you hear women saying that to another woman, a single woman who has logic, sense, and she's talking sense, trying to help, or not trying to, speaking truth to her female friend or friends, and they'll tell her, wait a minute, where's your man? Or you're not a mother, how can you talk? Don't tell me what to do. That's when that woman should literally recognize you're not dealing with logic. Walk away. And
Yeah,
if it's your relative and you've got young ones from that individual, cousins, nieces, nephews, when they are playing with you or you're talking to them, just let them know. And it sticks with them, it stays with them. Say, listen, when you get to a certain age and things just get out of hand, know that you can come see Auntie. I got a place for you to stay. And just keep that in mind. And you don't have to be lost. You don't have to be out on the street. And if you can't get there, I'll always keep my number handy. My email, you can always reach me. You have to do that sometimes. I'm talking to the uncles and aunts out there.
yeah. No, I definitely want to keep the channels open with my niece, as much as possible because I know it's already the fog of war over there. So I mean, yeah, I just feel like I guess it ultimately boils down to not having done the inventory within yourself. It's like I don't want to be treated the way I was treated. I don't want to go through. Not to say everything was done completely egregiously. I think a lot of things that really mattered were, but I mean, like the inventory hasn't been taken. People are not taking inventory, so the ignorance of that, I feel like allows a person to engage in frivolous sexual activity and just randomly have bring another body into the world, and it's like that's what and then you're gonna have another person that I feel like internalizes the hate because they don't really because I feel like when I was younger I just I still struggle with it where I don't I just don't like me. I just internalize like man I just don't like me. And and I guess at one point I didn't really realize I didn't like anybody because I didn't like me. And so I feel like at this point in time, though, I don't really have a problem with my father and my mother as individuals. I think they made poor decisions, but
Mhm.
and I look at the decisions as being poor, and like the state of affairs is not ideal. But individually, I don't hate them. It's just that obviously their decision making was poor, and I don't want to repeat that. And I'm doing the inventory just to pay attention to the details that brought me to the state and drag me through the mud of the things I went through, like internally, that mentally, how I feel, like my self-worth and everything like that. I feel like I would it could be a different way. If it's the way it is, it doesn't have to be that way. Like it has to be another possibility because not everybody is me, so I feel like it can be done a different way. And I guess people just assume because they just don't do the inventory. They assume like this is the way it's going to be done, or it has to be this way. And
Mhm.
so I mean, it's difficult. It's going to be like you said, a small minority. We're not going to get critical mass, but it'll be um it'll be actually valuable though. It'll be
Mhm. That's
something to
all
be
it takes.
cherished.
That's all it takes. Literally, that's all it takes. Doesn't take a minion of sentience to cause a ripple. A small pebble causes a ripple in a lake or a pond.
Can any two type of people get together and do it the right way, or I mean, like even like, or does it have to be that it has to be a total like
You mean like that
respect?
place in Arkansas?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, is there any way, like, if say if it was in a calamitous situation where you only had so many options, would you be able to make it work no matter what? Like, is it a way to make it work to balance it no matter what, or is it does it have to
Because
be
of,
at a certain design and you got to hold
because
out if
of
that doesn't?
the, pardon, continue.
No, I was gonna say you got to hold out, and if that design doesn't show up, then it wasn't supposed to, and you don't engage.
Mhm. There's a lot of indoctrinating that has to be undone, unlearned. So that will be part of the building process. And the will has to be strong and resilient at the same time. You have to forego not your differences that you see on the surface, not your differences that you know exist within, but you respect all of those differences. You know that this is part of a preliminary period. So therefore, it's in the adaptation mode. Obviously, who knows how long it will last, but it is part of the preliminary mode. And you will have to work with individuals, with groups, or, maybe interacting with a group that's not part of your group, but outside your group. You will have to interact. So respect is always key. You respect yourself. Before you get into like and love, you respect. The true man respects and seeks respect, demands respect only. It's not about like. You like pizza, or you recognize that pizza is unhealthy, so you like avocado. But then you recognize it's not about liking the avocado, it's about realizing and respecting the avocado for what it is made for and what it has to offer. So like and all these other terms go out the window because they're associated with flippant emotions. In a community, that can be its downfall, and usually is. The flippant emotions that come with your affiliations that you definitely have to question and more than likely eliminate. Most people are holding on to those who are in the fueling factions, the duality set up, the black white, unwilling to let those out of themselves and let go of them because they have no place.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, like I look at it like because we kind of in that situation, it's like a post-apocalyptic world, and like if I'm at my best and I'm being completely honest and I'm just at and I've enhanced myself, my skills to the best that they could be. Would it still would it still be bad for a woman to be with me even though like I have the genetics I have? Like is like what I'm saying, like is that or do you or you know what I mean? Like, that's what I guess I'm asking. Like do people in this circumstance that we're in, kind of a post-apocalyptic circumstance that's like being reset again, like because you see people of different persuasions or different I guess types or what have you want to look at it being together, and it's like I don't know. I mean, like if this is the best possible person, like is this what it's going to be? Is this the best possible outcome that we can get? Like, and we just have to work with that, or do you just continue to hold out?
Now, you do know you've asked this question many times. You know that, right?
Yeah, but I mean in different ways, but I mean I
Right.
feel like yeah, I just want to ask, like, is it, and not, I hate to make it so personal in that way, but I feel like
Okay.
if it's like a community of people being
Mhm.
together, if it's a community of people being together, as far as the going forth and the copulation part,
The
like
vanity and the pull of that vanity, for example, with so-called race and the affiliation factor are strong. The programming is strong. It's a spirit. It's very strong. And it's a volatile one because you're going to meet your counterpart or your opposition when you step outside. So the person who is black is going to meet their opposition when they step outside their door or when they turn on their computer or when they vicariously watch something on television and feel a connection with the so-called black person on the screen. So the person who is in a situation who wants to be a so-called biological parent has to fight against that, but it takes knowledge, and you recognize it's not a fight. It's about realization of where it came from, what started it, and how this is on a weak platform in the first place. If you have to biologically procreate, then there has to be a true logical purpose through it, with it, for it, behind it. If not, you can raise a child that doesn't have parents, and so can the woman that you marry. Not female. You don't want to marry a female. Females, there's female dogs, there's female cats, there's female birds, there's female vampires. That means what? That means they have the ability to procreate. So what? You want a woman who recognizes that there's a purpose to her being, there's a purpose to her core. She respects, she wants respect, she gets respect. That's what you want. You don't want a female. She happens to be a female by function, by format, but she's a woman based on her connection with you as a man. You don't want anything else other than that. So if you come to that fight that, I want my own biological child, again, go to the knowledge factor. Why do you want to have your own biological child? You want a mini-me. You want to spread forth yourself so that you can see it in the future. Even when you're not here, you know that it's here. So you think.
Yeah, but like if I have a community and I don't have any children, people are still going to want to have children within the community, is what I'm saying.
That's fine for them, but many of them will know their purpose too, as you will know your purpose. If your purpose is to actually procreate in the experimental, physical sense, then so it be. If not, then you know it, you recognize it, you respect that. It's similar to, and that's why I use the example or analogized it with the so-called race factor. Can you forego and give up your so-called whiteness? Can you forego and give up your so-called blackness? Misnomers, egregious lies in the first place because you're not white. White is an adjective, and a noun is not an adjective. A noun can be a gerund, or a gerund can be a noun. But you can't be an adjective. You're a black what? You're not even black. I know black. My phone is black. You're not white. The keys on the screen of my phone are white. So you're not white. So why are you telling lies? You're telling lies because it's the fuel that maintains this polarity within this realm. And you get the benefits that are given to each group, or the struggle. Some see that as a benefit, not recognizing the struggle continues. You want to keep that going? Is that something to be proud of? Yes, resilience is something to be cognizant of and put forth, that all know that you did this, you fought for this, and you achieved this. That's perfect. But to say that the struggle continues and to want to be living in that in perpetuity says what? That you're getting off on strife. That's not what you want. You have to start asking, well, why is the strife continuing? Who is maintaining this? It's more than likely a confederacy. Someone that looks like me is benefiting, working with someone that doesn't look like me. So that says what? You got two enemies. They don't look like each other, but they're working against you to your detriment. So that cancels that black-white thing right out the window. You're not those things. So if you want to be something, if you're in a world of nations, black is not a nation, white is not a nation. You can have nations that you claim you want to be white, which is how you see manifesting these days. It's nothing new. Through religion, through politics, through dogma, indoctrination. You have all these various factions, these bloodlines coming together as a conglomerate under the label of white. For what? To work against that which is black and to maintain an edge economically, socially, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to do what comes with that part of the game and support all the things that go with it. Being silent, not being a liar, being a parasite, wanting to make sure that the male in the black group stays underfoot so that they cannot gain wealth, perpetuating every parasitic thing while at the same time on the surface putting out through your marketing that you are the best, you are the brightest, you are God. And the polarity version of the spectrum or of the duality is the opposite. So if you got a right, you got a left, then white is right, black is left, white is God, black is devil, white is good, black is devil. No one really realizes these things. That's the way all dualities work. So somebody's the man, somebody's the woman. So what's going on here? And no one's actually using basic logic or sense to recognize, stop these polarity terms, get rid of them, and then take the next steps. Because you won't have any kind of community, even if your community all looks like you. That answers that question. So can you have a community that is of people of different so-called bloodlines? Yeah, but it takes inner knowledge and only recognizing and seeking and living for truth that will help that community maintain itself and respecting that which is logical. I can be in a community.
Core principles in logic. I mean, core principle in law has to be respected.
Exactly. So you have a prime directive, and no, it's not a struggle to maintain it. You're not fighting against it. Like, oh, this is so hard to keep. You know, I need my racism. No, you don't.
Yeah. No, it's not funny, but it was funny the way you said it. But yeah, it's true. Yeah, man. I mean, I wanted to ask you about I wanted to ask you. It's like kind of unrelated, but because you said Confederacy, and it kind of reminded me of it. Like, who, like when? Because you know, I was reading a lot of the people, because they say only like what 2% or so of so-called white people had slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard a lot of them are Scottish or Jewish, or so-called Jewish. I don't know, you know, because again, it's proxy Scots and proxy Jews.
Well, no, I call people what they call themselves, you know, Jewish. They're not the original bloodline. They're not Hebraic, but they are Jewish. That's the term they use. Okay, so be it. But they are not of the original bloodline. Those in the know it, but those who have succumbed to the dogma, it's no different than, you know, like the immigrants that go to, you know, basically parasite. Immigrants become parasites when they don't stop and think and recognize what they're participating in for a better life, which is the so-called excuse or battle cry of most immigrants. You know, my grandfather came here with just a penny in his pocket, and look what the empire. BS. When you come to a place where the Aboriginal on the land is being misused, abused, and marginalized, you're just sucking off of them. And their fight, their struggle is benefiting you, not them. So let's keep it truthful only. So when a so-called immigrant comes to a land, their purpose is to come and build for themselves. Nothing wrong with that, I guess. And to grow for themselves. So what are they going to do? They're going to benefit their own first. Not recognizing that what should occur, you had no community in the place that you left. If you had true community there, you could take over those who are harming you. It's no different than all of the people in this land. So you know who the true Aboriginal is in this land. They never left, and they don't leave.
I guess
in the face of,
magnetically they can't.
Exactly, but even if they could, they still don't. They stay here, they fight for the land, they die for the land. Totally different than anyone else. Other people are just like, I'm out of here, I got the money, I'm gone, I'm an expat, I'm going someplace. It's okay to leave. You have the right to do that. It's okay to stay. You have the right to do that. But know that when you go to a place that is designated for, everyone's got their designations. That's what we talked about earlier. When you violate that and you disrespect that, you are parasiting them and you're turning yourself into a parasite and loving it. You don't do that. There are consequences for that. We are seeing the consequences.
So
So
okay, so these people with the Hebraic costumes on, and then the people in the Scottish costumes, like
Mhm.
who I guess I just want to know like the transition, you know, like because the Confederate flag is a Scottish flag,
Mhm.
and so I kind of just always want to know like. So I asked in the beginning, like, who's the real Irish, and like, you know, who's, you know, because we've discussed the Scots being black and Scot meaning black.
That's a
I
union, so-called Union Jack, I think is the term for it. And it's a Hebraic so-called flag. But keep in mind that flags, anyone who adopted the whole flag system without, readily recognizing what's happening was just participating in a war game. And maybe they were forced to, because again, you're in an empire of nations. If you have no nation, you have no prince, then by edict of the papacy, then you have no right to any land that you stand on. Anyone can come in and take it. That's one of their papal bulls. When I say they, I'm referring to the clerics. They maintain hegemony over all the jurisdictions or dioceses. And therefore, what goes with that is a particular so-called mindset. And one of the things within that mindset is, you mentioned Jesuits earlier. Well, one of the things about the Jesuits is to be surreptitious and clandestine in activities. Are other groups part of that same structure? Yeah. You can name the religions, we know what they are. Some of them are offshoots or manifestations out of the Vatican. And I don't want to turn anyone off or make anyone upset, but before Islam was Mohammedism, and Mohammedism comes out of the Vatican.
So
Before that, people were
did somebody dust? Was it like a spell book? Did somebody dust it off? Like, this seems to work at this point in the infinite loop. If we just unleash this cult, do we unleash the crescent moon cult? At this point, they're gonna fall for it because this is the point they always fall for it.
well, there are many spell books, but it doesn't take much of a spell to manipulate so-called minds when they have succumbed to religious dogma and values. That's the danger of religion. I'm not going to quote so-called Marx, but he himself was of that bloodline, or so-called bloodline of usurpers, if you will. And he himself said that it was like opium. And if you know what opium brought down China.
Yeah, I mean it's why it got widespread there for a while. I mean, now they got the fentanyl is basically synthetic opium, right?
In a sense, but there are more than just that. You don't need fentanyl to bring down most of the so-called modern westernized nations today. You can use food, you can use vaccines, you can use whatever. There's so many distractions. That's the key. It's not the drug. It's not the food. It's the distraction. The distraction and the discord that comes about when a sentient cannot even think for at least an hour. Not think about the world around them, not think about the pressures of anything, but to focus within and do a scan, what's happening within. What has to be repaired that hasn't been repaired? What has become chronic within? And it's just, and I'm not just referring to the physical, I'm referring to all of it, the spiritual. When there's no time to do just that, when all you have is your fellowship when you go to the church on Sunday, or before you go to bed and you say your prayer, if that's all you have, that's not enough. You need at least a 24-hour period, 7 days. You need that 24-hour, seventh day, if you want to call it that, where you stop and think and commune with that. Some call Most High, some call the Ultimate Father, some call the Haya Haya, the I am that I am. When you commune, truly, that is what matters as far as regrouping, re-energizing, and giving yourself some time to say, like fasting, food's not my boss. This world is not your boss. It's got a heavy marketing plan that keeps you grounded in it and constantly distracted by it, but it's not your boss. It didn't make you. That misquote, you're made by your village, you're made by your community. No, you're not made by your community. Your community crafts you and influences you. But what if you have a really bad community? Well, there you go. Your facade does not make you. You should not be the facade. You come here, and that's the core you want to focus on when you contemplate. That's the connection with the all, with the creator, originator. The spirit, no. Not even the soul for most purposes, although the soul does have a direct connect, but it gets hijacked in a sense or thwarted. But that core is the direct connect.
And everybody has that.
Mm-hmm. You have to. You wouldn't be here without it.
I'm just making sure, man.
You would literally be your great grand whatever. You literally would be them. There would be no you would be just that individual, and you would just manifest, remanifest over and over and over again.
Is that what the manufactured human is, though?
The manufactured human, if that is actually a reality, would not have a core. Or to really put a cog in the wheel of these so-called scientists, they cannot make that core, but when they attempt to get rid of it, it keeps popping up. So no matter what they do, they're not really creating anything. And that core appears within. It might be soulless, but that core is there. And they cannot get around that.
And so would we call that the Tao? Because it's like the expressionless, the objective, truly objective state.
You can say it's somewhat like that, but it transcends that. There's no philosophy behind it. There's no so-called school of thought behind it. It is, you can say, that part of the breath of life that is given to life. And while it's within you, with you, around you, above you, whatever it is there, and you are too. And it is unaffected by anything that you encounter. It's unaffected by the stimuli. It would have to be. This would be a strange place to think it would collapse in itself if your core was contaminated. And it's designed never to be contaminated. Because that would mean that your creator originator is contaminated.
So even if you're like kind of created out of fiat or off the strength of like by virtue of what the creator created, like if you're a residual creation, you still have the likeness of that core. It's still there. Like you still have access.
Access to it might be difficult. Again, you see what goes on when you jeopardize such things as melanin, or you jeopardize, you cannot communicate with that which we call a sun as a result of mating and the mating of mutants. whether it be albinism or leprosy, etc., you just lost that direct connect. You have to get certain things, and only some of those things can you get, because you can't get the full-fledged sun. So you see the importance of knowing, the importance of mating. These activities are nothing to take lightly. We are to respect these things, these actions, these activities, these parts of us that we can either participate in or not. Some people should not have made it.
Yeah,
There's
that's
nothing
for
wrong
sure.
with that.
Yeah, yeah. Is Yohiwa a correct number to dial when you talk about the originator creator? Because I was reading in James Adair's book. He was talking about the Aboriginals, and he was
Mhm.
saying that they were calling that was his connection with them saying like Jehovah or whatever, Yahweh Vahe. He said that they were saying Yohiwa, and it's the same letters or same uh, sounds basically, just
Sounds
different
like
inflection.
sounds like an allusion to Yahweh.
Yeah, I was just asking if it's if there's like a feel like, because like when it comes to reading like Hebrew, I guess like a lot of it I guess is up for interpretation for some of it, because you might have a different vernacular, different dialect. How you say something might be different, because we could both look at IHVH or whatever, but you have a different accent or whatever, so you pronounce it a different way, but you're saying the same thing. Is it like that? Does the intent override the execution, or no? When
But
you're calling it,
we do know some things left over from um, past writings, that Het and Yod from original Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew were part of the moniker, if you will, not necessarily title, not necessarily name, but of that which is to be called. And you think of that sentence, a phrase. It's not an imperative. It's more of a declarative. That which is to be called, and that is the only relative pronoun that can be used for a sentient or something that's not a sentient. We can't say which. We can say who, but who is usually just for the sentients. You know, he, she, him, her, them. But when we use het and yod together, we get hey or hai, and that translates to that which always is, that which is self-generating. I am, I am.
so when we're taking that day out of the week to defragment and to collect ourselves and to fully connect with ourselves and what created us, um how, given that, how would you, how, like, do you have a potasode, I guess, as far as like how to make that call?
I do. And fasting is one of the ways to break connections to things that you're allowed to bind you. Food, sustenance is to be respected, but it's not supposed to be taken out of context or allowed to grow into a pattern that is or manifests out of context, puts you out of frame. When you forego those connections or those boundaries, those bindings, you're able to see others as well. And that so-called clarity is the first path to connection. You can now make your call. But you have to fast. And is there also a part of, is there a proving to it? Is there like a so-called rite of passage also built within it and inherent in fasting? Definitely. But the primary thing is to show self symbolically and physically that all of the other physical realms you can forego, and you are designed, or designed to forego. To a degree, you're staying within the laws of this realm, but you are designed to forego. When you think of so-called breatharians, it's just a fancy word for going, showing that you are designed to go beyond those boundaries. And if those who did that, and I have, if you did not, pardon the term, take advantage of that time frame, then okay, well, you lose on that part. But that's optimum time. That's perfect timing to actually, as you say, make that call. But it's not to be done for vanity's sake, obviously so.
I mean, just for instructions.
Yeah, exactly. You want to know what to do. You want to know. Notice we want to know. We want to know about ourselves. We want to know not necessarily the so-called future. We want to know exactly what we are to do in our everyday manifestation of life. We want to know. We want to know how to interconnect. We want to know how to make a difference that is beneficial. Often the answers are already there. You've been imbued with them. And that clutter that comes from the allure, the overindulgence, often is what blinds you, then binds you. As I said, I'm not putting down food. Obviously, that would be foolish. I'm not putting down sex. That would be foolish. I'm saying that each thing, each object has its place. You cannot take it out of its place, nor can you can, but you are wise not to allow yourself nor anyone else to put you in a predicament where you are now part of a pattern. Those that look at pornography, or it doesn't necessarily have to be pornography, your network television and movies, not that they're, you can't compare U.S. television with Europe, for example. Europe is beyond the level of pornographic. I'm referring to the pornographic and the vulgarity of the commonness and the programming, the subliminal usage of not just innuendo, but direct programming. And it's not all sexual, but it will use your sexual nature like a parasite uses its force, your life force. So it's all of the various things that you allow to be misused that should not be misused because they have a sacred function, a sacred purpose. You lose your connection to that sacred part, that sacred aspect of you, of life. You lose a lot.
When it comes to like different parts of a person, like if I don't know if it's a strands of DNA type of thing, but like kind of like we spoke about earlier, people using substances to get to places where they couldn't naturally get to. Is it like kind of like the word instructions is like you're constructing or like structuring something inside of you, like you have a part of you that can go into a realm or that reflects it's like your portal, your doorway into that realm. And it's like the house around that doorway is not built. Like you're undeveloped in that realm. You going into that realm, you're basically homeless. You don't have any established part of you, I guess, and while other people came with that already established. Like can you continually grow in that way? Because I remember one time we were talking about recessives, and you were saying like the recessive is still coming from the dominant, and like it's still like the framework is still there. I guess certain things are just dormant, and I'm just wondering, like, for the manufactured person or the person that's been crossed with that, are there parts of themselves that just are blank or that like need development, or is that development just not even possible, like to reach to experience those realms or those places? Like there's no receptor within themselves to experience certain things. Like,
For the most part, what is dead in that sense. If as a result of your progenitors' activities or actions, your pineal, let's say, is completely calcified and minimally functional. Is there anything you can do with that? You have to forego a lot, literally a lot, forsake a lot, change a lot, and completely live in a different way, completely outside of the spectrum of your race, your so-called culture, your food systems. You literally have to, and then and only then you'll start to actually see a difference. You'll see a change. It will do what the pineal is designed to do. It will snap back into position. You'll gain some function. But most are not prepared to go that allure, that vanity, that hold. They want that hold. And they give in to the so-called pressure and the encumbrances of this realm. You know, can't do it because I got bills. Can't do it because of this. You know, can't do it because I don't want to piss off my family. Can't do whatever reason, or it's just too difficult.
You just get more entrenched, though. I feel like that's like a commitment to being more entrenched.
Entrenched in the facade.
Because yeah, I
Entrenched
feel
in
like
the facade.
it's a lot. I mean, you get that a lot. A lot of people are like, I can't do this because I gotta do this, or I gotta, you know. And then it's like you have a kid or whatever. Now you really can't. Now you really tell yourself you can't stop, and now you're even more entrenched in the distraction.
Mm-hmm.
But
Again, doing things without true thought. Did you have the child because you needed that excuse? If you go deeply into it, you'll realize and you'll discover, yes, you did.
yeah, I mean, I think it's like the one of the realest things you could do, I guess, other than pass. You know, create life like that, or create a whole other body. Like, I think that's like, and I think you got to be really real with yourself to even engage in something that real, because it's like everything else is kind of like a lot of stuff is conceptual, you know, and I think a lot of people get caught up in like emotions and fleeting things, but it's not really like really substantial. It's no real, you know, but having creation is like things are actually that's like the realest thing, I think, or next to, I guess, passing.
It's
And
not only the realest, it's one of the highest sacred formats. And because it has been taken out of alignment completely and disrespected, you know, forget about devalued, it is relegated to the lowest extreme. And so, therefore, true knowledge about so called sex and its purpose is sequestered, almost gone. There are a few that know, but are there many that will listen? They might listen, but will they learn and implement? Probably not. The allure to the pleasure, the allure to the, pardon this term, the psychoses of abandonment issues, loneliness issues, depression issues, because that's usually why people indulge in so-called sex, because they want to feel the need to belong, to have someone that they can call their own or be called um, part of a couple. When in actuality, they're not recognizing that this goes beyond them. You don't own sex, no more than you own the land beneath your feet. It is designated as your gateway in, and you are to utilize it wisely. You don't have to, as I always say, it's your choice, and there are always consequences. So it's time to recognize that there are consequences, not to be motivated or instilled with fear by those consequences, because that's not supposed to be your reason or your impetus for doing. You remember, I always say, I use that example of this is from the 80s. There was an ad, um, and it was very, very, very juvenile, and it had different young people being interviewed on the street and saying, things showing that they were indoctrinated. You shouldn't cheat because you can get AIDS. You shouldn't be, quote unquote cheating, period. But you should recognize that what is cheating? What is this all about? Is this saying that you own and someone else owns you? You have to recognize what you're doing. You're just attaching yourself and becoming part of a commercial system within your own household. You don't have so-called sex without knowledge, because there are many things that can occur, not just so-called AIDS, the bioagent AIDS, but there are many reasons for not doing it. Primarily because you know that the potential for offspring arrival is possible, highly likely possible, but mainly because there's so much more involved. This is an energetic call to action each time you indulge in it. So you don't do things frivolously or for your own selfish pleasure or gain or whatever.
So you're sending out a signal
You're
every time.
sending out a signal every time you do it. So
Yeah,
you don't do this without recognizing that. And you have to unlearn the so-called urge or the so-called need. And you've heard that a lot. If you don't get sex, you'll go crazy. If you don't have sex, you'll never know how to use it. You'll be unskilled, blah, blah, blah. All of the various things that are used to maintain the programming, the spirit, the app that goes with it. Not recognizing that this is not for that at all. For one, you don't own it. And it has its designated laws that apply to it.
Yeah, I mean, I really, I mean, I can't wish about nothing now. Ain't no point in wishing, but it would have been great if I did not misuse my sexual faculties. I mean, like, not just the damage I did to myself, but the damage that, like, I was involved in with basically other people, and I just. What is the best way to really cleanse that? You just continue to be abstinent, or like things like ibuprofen? Like what is the best way to shake that off?
What's done is done. What remains is the knowledge, and that is basically your library to refer to so that you know how not to repeat, and you know the things that you did, and you can recognize cues and patterns based on that knowledge, but you don't wipe that away.
Yeah, I don't think it's any way. I mean, it's there, it's done. It's like I said, I can't wish it away. But I mean, like, what would a person do to I guess to reestablish that connection to those faculties, and to, and to keeping the keeping things, I guess, in a sane circumstance, as far as your sexuality. Like, do you just continue to be abstinent? Is
Well,
that just the ultimate?
these are I guess you can call them trends, if you will. Trends or status trends. Abstinence is a status trend. It has psycho-spiritual connotations, because when you hear abstinence, you think religious, you think Christian, you think whatever religion has that type of, a priest is supposed to be abstinent, a nun is supposed to be abstinent,
Yeah, like chastity.
chastity, celibacy, etc. These are all statuses, usually temporary, like a diet. That shouldn't play into it. You're supposed to have knowledge of self. Now, and part of self is so-called sexuality and so-called sex. You recognize and respect the purpose for it all. Remember, I talked about taste buds. Many go off on some tangent or some extreme when they're taught about taste buds. They think, oh, taste buds are evil. I rebuke you, taste buds. You mommy, you're evil. No, you don't rebuke your taste buds. You respect them. That's why you have them. They're there for a purpose. You know that they're going to be incited when certain things are done. You do not disrespect them by inputting things that are going to damage you or going to thwart your natural receptors and create a backward system, an addiction system within you. So no, you're not going to disrespect them, but you respect them. And at the same time, you don't honor them and start paying homage to them and worshiping them and become a foodie. So you don't go either extreme. You recognize that responsible so-called middle, and you live accordingly. There's no fight. There's no, I got to be abstinent from this. I need to diet from that. No, you recognize that your sexual regenerative parts, organs, your penis, your scrotum, your gonads, everything within, it is constructed by, remember we talked about the construction of this realm. Well, guess what? That goes with the sentience too. All of these parts, logically, of high intelligence, origin, put together for a purpose. And you are to maybe rediscover that purpose, know that purpose, and not get caught up in the indoctrination that says, oh, hey, it's pleasure. And anyone who tells you to deny yourself pleasure is going to make you go against your nature. You're going to start having hang-ups and issues and problems, and then you're going to get so pent up, you're going to go out and rape a dog. Stop. That's not going to happen. It might happen to some because they, easily get programmed, and that definitely happens. But you recognize logic, you recognize what makes true sense, and you also know that what you have been told, what you have been programmed to do, you have to undo and unlearn. There's nothing wrong with respecting and only utilizing your various parts for their purpose. Your legs are meant to carry you, help you stand, help you walk, help you lift things, help you bend, help you get out of issues where you have to run, help you catch something that you are chasing. That's what your legs are for. Maybe even defend yourself. But are your legs meant to step on small children? No. But people do that. People use their legs to harm others. Are your hands meant to do things that are wicked? No. Is your brain meant to do things that are wicked? No. Obviously, there are those that do. We see this in transgenic so-called foods. We see this in the so-called rules and regulations of different governments. You see this every day if you look at the internet and see the inner workings and ongoings of these constant recidivist pattern so-called government systems and drama, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same that you see the wickedness and the misuse of these sacred parts, these sacred vessels. That tells you right there, and it shouldn't be your motivation, but that tells you that you can do that or you can do this. That path, someone said, is not the easiest path. And the only reason why it's not easy is because you're surrounded by showcasing. You're surrounded by all of these so-called temptations. They're not temptations, but they can be if you let them. Don't start feeding your children sugar at all, because that's also one of the helpful gateways to weaken the will. Don't allow them to watch TV. It's automatically a steganographic coding system. Meaning it's embedded with subliminals automatically. Don't let them do that. Same thing with your computer. It's just a glorified television. Don't allow the children to have that. You see, I see a lot of people with their tablets for children. Don't allow that. Don't buy toys that are tablet forms or little kiddie versions of laptops. Don't do that. Buy them things that help induce logic and reasoning within them. Talk to them.
How does the screen? I remember you explained it to me a while ago, but how does the screen calcify the pineal for those of us that don't know?
In short, these are devices that give and take. They're consoles, and a console is a medium. And you know what a medium is in the occultic sense. They're also designed to extract moisture, so they dehydrate. And when you are in front of these, the input from these screens automatically creates a large amount of calcium within the brain. And this is how the calcification begins. You're basically lobotomizing yourself chemically.
It's like CTE kind of.
Yeah,
You're just making your mind, your brain concrete.
correct. You should stick a hanger in your nose and stick it up into your cranium and just swirl it around like the Egyptians did when they had embalmed or when they would put the brain in a canopic jar. You might as well just do that because that's what you're doing to your brain.
So what was the what? Why was that? Why would they revere the heart so much?
Well, allegedly through the heart, you it was a gateway, as the liver was a gateway when you were in your alive form. Allegedly, the heart was the gateway, and that not only the gateway, but the measurable last chair in your life. So in other words, everything that you did all came down to that one point when you stopped, and it would be recorded on that chair, and that chair would be the heart, and that heart could be weighed. And depending on the balance that comes from that heart or that chair, chair has 4 legs. If it has 3 legs, it's imbalanced. Then you would go through shoot, get shat out, and fragmented. If it didn't, you would go forward and you go into the land of the underworld and continue on your journey into the duat.
So it's like the dreaming process is like practice for this every day. What I'm assuming.
Practice for what?
No, that day when you go forward or you go back, kind of like you said.
Well, certainly, and then some. It's also for your everyday living while you're here. Nothing about you is frivolous, accidental, but everything is important about you and the things that you do. When you don't know that, you allow those who elevate themselves or you elevate to make you minuscule.
I remember you were telling me about one time you had a client that was some woman. She had a dream where she was like in the 1700s or something, and like she went and did something, and like it's kind of like altering the future or in the past at the same time because she went back and fixed something that fixed now.
Are you referring to a client who I walked through the recidivist patterns of her bloodline? Or is that the one you're referring to?
I'm not sure exactly the
That was,
details of her personally. I just remember you saying that.
because I don't divulge anyone's personal accounts, but I was probably sharing that with you because it related to your life. No, there was a woman, is a woman who had certain repeat patterns going on, and they manifested themselves in her offspring. And it was the same thing over again. And so when she reached into the past, she recognized where it started. And from that recognition was the groundwork for addressing the present. She recognized what she was doing and humbled herself, because that humility and honest look into her ancestry and their actions and her actions helped her to become resilient. But if she didn't, and also, become humble enough to recognize what she is supposed to do so that it doesn't repeat. It had already started to repeat in her offspring. So now all she could do now is make sure it didn't repeat in that next generation.
Yeah, I remember you were saying like she basically like kind of like went back in time to a previous generation in her dreams and did something like altered something.
Not necessarily altered anything, but addressing your dreams and recognizing that they are therapeutic or pivotal in your reality now can help you to make changes. But as I said, the past is the past, and it is there as your library.
How do you know the difference between what's a telltale sign between a memory and actually creating memories when you're dreaming?
Well, that's where you're going to have to contact me, and I'll show you how, because that is in depth itself. You definitely want to work with someone like myself to do that, because there's so much input that influences and blocks and fools you to make you think, oh, this is all theory of memory. Many psychoanalysts and psychotherapists and psychologists used to do that, especially those who use hypnotherapy. Not a lot, but allegedly many used to do that to clients and or patients and input information into them. Governments, militaries, army, in their psychological branch, they would do things like that, implant memories in order to make a hypnotic suggestion work. Because allegedly, you cannot hypnotize someone to go against their brain. But if you implant certain memories within them, they won't be going against their brain.
How is the memory planted? This is inception, right?
Something like that. You can, people do it every day when you're looking at these devices. You're getting memories implanted into you. So when you dream and you have that visual, is that an actual occurrence, or are you melding something you saw on a screen with something that actually happened, and now you just manifested a memory?
Yeah, I remember you were saying as well, like that. The issue with pictures and videos is that like you're seeing yourself then, which was now in the now, and that creates like a it's like a feedback loop, like, and it's like it takes you away from the actual you somehow.
Mm.
Something along those lines.
Any type of programming that you're receiving artificially is going to have an effect, and you should automatically know that. These are, no different than the food you eat. They're going in you, so obviously you should recognize that they're going to have an effect on you. When you think otherwise, and when you don't think at all, you are going to be victimized by the very thing, the very thing that you take in. So you have to be wise and know that the difference between what is in so-called reality versus what's on the screen, yeah, there's a difference. It's in the presentation. But you can see that both have an effect. If you witness a traumatic incident, it will have an effect on you.
So yeah, so like when it comes to like assassination or Gaza,
Or like
and
something you witnessed within the last few weeks.
yeah, so yeah, if you look at like Eye for Palestine, you just see babies being blown up, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like making everybody a war veteran. It's like subconsciously.
It's doing that, and one of the effects of this was there were many studies that were done, especially during the so-called Vietnam War, and because during the Vietnam War, some say that was the first televised war. Nothing's first, but what was occurring was a desensitization of the masses. So you got used to seeing young 19-year-old males getting shot up and blown up, and no big deal. You watch like, how terrible. Can we watch All in the Family now? And so it was no big deal. That's why when the vets were returning, there was no fanfare, there was no ticker tape parades. People were just desensitized to it. In fact, in many instances, people were throwing bottles and rocks at vets coming in on the trains, even if they were in wheelchairs. And many of them came back with missing parts and brain trauma. The first time many people were seeing young men who looked like Frankenstein's twin, seeing stitches in their forehead and their heads shaved. People never saw that, or staples on their skulls. Most people never saw that before, but this is what they were getting firsthand witness to.
And
And that
now,
experience,
And
And
now
now it's
you
like
got live stream.
yeah, you got video games, you got digital widescreens. It's entertainment. You know, I mentioned this before. You see male sacrifices on a daily basis, and no one really cares. You know.
But like you could like live stream. You can see right now somebody's house that got blown up and a lady that lost her arm or something. You could go
Yeah,
look at that right now
exactly.
and just scroll. You could be scrolling from like, oh, this is gardening and this is puppies, and then it just be like, oh, this is a woman with half her fucking head blown off. Like it's a whole. Those things. It's like too many things are touching. Things are not supposed to be. All those things aren't supposed to touch.
Hmm.
Like it's like I don't know. I guess like with food in general, like a bad food combination. Like this is not supposed to be next to this.
If you
But
saw how sentients are, this is a I want to use a verb that really doesn't fit unless that verb has another meaning that I'm unaware of. But if you would actually witness and see, like a fly on the wall, how sentients treat themselves, and you did so with an objective brain, you would realize and recognize immediately that this is self-abuse. This is slow suicide. It's self-sabotage. Going to a fast food restaurant is disgusting. Eating the meats that come out of supermarkets is gross and disgusting. It's vile. If you could see your insides, would you vomit? Would you faint? If you could see the damage that you're doing to yourself, if you could see the sewage lines and how many of them are clogged up and backed up as a result of an increase in fecal matter because people are just eating a lot more and the things that they are eating can't be broken down, heavy laden with plastics, heavy metals.
yeah, like you said, man, we gotta stop. We have to take a day, at least a day, a week to stop. I mean, I feel like with the way it's compounding so much over the years that like, I mean, even in my personal experience, when I just keep going and I don't take I don't take some time to actually settle for a second. I mean, and when I get tired, I just make bad decisions and I think poorly about myself and my surroundings, like and about the future. And I, people are so chronically fatigued, and their organs are so, and the endocrine system so fatigued at this point that how much further can it even go? Like how many generations can you even squeeze out of this dysfunction?
It's going to a factor, a head, if you will. It's all put into effect deliberately by controllers of this game. And that's why, yes, you must not violate these laws that come with this realm. One of them is giving that break, that rest, that period of rest. I used to just say so that clients could get it. It would be concrete to them. I would say, give your anus a break. It is constantly going, and it's not meant for that. Give your mouth a break. Don't be eating all the time. Stop.
Yeah, I remember you said it to me. You were like, you know how much chewing that is over the years? You know how much grinding of your teeth that you're doing all these years?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, you're right. This is absurd.
And that is where you start to deteriorate. And then you want different, but not realizing you're not going to get different because you're not doing what it takes to bring about longevity, to bring about true wisdom. When you are doing all of the things that are self-violative, when you're literally going against what it should be. So you've got people who are saying that they're vegan, but they're still doing the same exact thing. When you've seen it, I've seen it. I don't scroll, but when I go online and I check certain things, messages or whatever, or to see if a post is online, if as I posted it, I'll have to go through some posts, and many of them are from I don't know how. I guess they just put it on your feed. And they're of people who are making different recipes or cooking. And the average meal contains too much. And I don't mean as far as size, I mean as far as a mix of things. It's just this hodgepodge. And that means the individual, whether it's an omnivore or so-called vegan, they're not honoring nor respecting the laws of digestion. Just looking at it in a common sense way should tell you all of this lovely mix, this mezcla, is going to be what when you finally make that outcome. That's just too much stuff. You don't do that to your washing machine. If you do, I'd like to see your clothes. They look like a walking rainbow.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't have all of that on your plate. That's overindulgence. For the purpose of what? Your tongue, which you've turned into a junkie, and your so-called psychology, which enables it. So part of the whole cycle is the visual and the mental, the spiritual, and the other part of it is the physical and the taste. Taste is only a short time, and because most don't practice true mastication, it's really short.
Yeah, no, I feel like that. When you really fast and then you come back into chewing food, it just feels like it's just so it feels so like you have to chew it to a liquid. Like you naturally, that's what you're supposed to do anyway. But I feel like you
Right.
don't really realize it until you fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your apparatus for swallowing and processing of solids is for liquefied material only. Any large chunks, that's just too much. Now you're increasing your stomach acids in order to break it down so that it can continue on through the duodenal and then further on from there.
And
But
so that would
that's,
destroy your teeth too, huh? Because then you're
yeah,
just
exactly. You're destroying everything from the orifice of the mouth on down. You're corrupting the esophageal lining, you're corrupting the stomach, and then of course you're creating a pattern, a traffic pattern, that's a good way of describing it, within the colon and the small intestine. And so you get this pileup that then becomes the caking on the walls of the intestine. And that piles up over years. You get a plaque-like substance, and it violates the sacredness of that realm. That realm is, I mentioned in a previous podisode, it's a paradoxical realm. It's supposed to be partially full and also empty. So it empties itself out. It's a duality region. It gets full, it gets empty. Depending on the part that the solid or the liquefied solid goes through, or supposedly liquefied solid goes through, it is then part of an absorption chain. And then after
somebody.
that, it goes through the elimination process. But if it cannot do any of those functions, now you have hell.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you were telling me like this is with like I think feel like set off a lot of like my discernment on food because somebody posted like how about people that have to drink a beverage to get the food down, and I remember you were saying like how to to separate drinking and eating, and then I feel like it logically brought me to a place where I was like, why would I eat anything that makes me so thirsty that I need to drink like that anyway right after?
Exactly. You bought something that obviously no thought was involved, true thought was involved. You're going to eat something that you have to rehydrate, or you're going to eat something that you now have to gouge and immerse and drown your canal with water in order to get down, to bring down.
What does
Violating
that do?
you violate peristalsis. That's a natural reaction, and it's part of the law within. You violate that because now peristalsis doesn't occur. You're now relying on that water to push it through. That will cause issues with the stomach acids and the production of bile. You're violating everything all the way through. It's a self-violating act. deliberately done by yourself because you're participating in it, but also set up that way within the mechanization and the weaponization rather of the food supply, food chain, food systems. Grocery stores are an abomination.
Yeah, and an attack is it's an attack, and it's abominable.
Hmm. It's a military. If for those who are in the military, they've heard of such a thing as a commissary. And in a commissary, you bought your rations or you bought the foods, and you bought a lot because that's how, you're in the military, and that's that military so-called training programming. So you bought usually foods that are packaged, things because you're going away and maybe your family's going away, I guess, if you get stationed somewhere. So you're buying things that can be frozen. You're buying a lot of so-called processed meats, everything processed. The processing of so-called foods is militarization. It's militarizing food. Frozen drinks, dehydrated, freeze-dried this, packaged this, canned this, canned that. These are all rations. The soldiers' rations are usually in cans or tubes or bags.
Yeah, and I had a friend that was a ranger in the military, and he said they used to put the little ration cans on it was like a microwave antenna, and the antenna would heat up so much that they could cook their food on that. And I was like, this cannot be good, bro.
No, it's not. The whole concept of going to war to kill someone you don't know is a violation in itself as well. You're killing strangers. You don't know them, but you're going with someone else's beef, alleged beef with. That's a violation. But then you're doing more violations when you eat these things called rations and putting yourself in these types of situations that you don't have to be in.
So since we're in the military-industrial complex system now, and it's going towards a pretty totally matrix dystopia, I mean, everything, it looks like it's going towards rations already anyway, because you got more people than ever on EBT, on food stamps. And it looks like they definitely want to bring in universal basic income. So it's like they turned everybody into a ration eating soldier, warring on themselves.
Well, more than likely, these policies will come with strings attached. You don't get your universal income unless you enlist, unless you agree to have certain things installed in your home, fire alarms, smart meters, whatever. That's already done. But nothing's going to be handed out freely, and that so-called universal income will be distributed. You'll have to get it at it can only be used at certain locations. Certain stores will have government contracts where they will.
Total fascism.
Right. So Aldi will accept your universal card. And in order to get that universal card, you're going to have to accept certain types of ID systems where you literally are known and tracked. But that's part of the God grid I mentioned.
And this is also to squeeze the small businesses out of business, because if people can't spend their money with them, how can they operate?
Well, there will be no more small businesses. The only types of businesses that will be considered small will be those that are sanctioned and allowed because you've applied for your certification to be a designated business. Otherwise, as you see, it doesn't seem so now, but if you could trace things backwards just within the last 75 years, you'll see that most of the things that existed then are gone now. The store, most people did not rely on grocery stores. They did not exist at a particular point in time. I recall, I know.
So
And you purchased from a grocer was someone who sold fresh things, mainly they had a butcher area, so they sold meats, and then they had fruit and produce in another section. And you had guys or girls in aprons stocking things. They came in crates, they came off of trucks. They all had different shapes and sizes. They washed these things off if they were fruits with peels before they put them on the basket so you can get them. And things were sold and put into baskets. You had a peck of this or a bag of this, or they were put into bags. They were not put into plastics. There was no, I never even saw plastic until the end of the 90s. Or not actually around the middle 90s, I saw plastics. But before that, there was no such thing as a plastic anything as far as your bags. And I didn't see bottled water until the late 70s. There was no such thing as water. I mean, it was silly. Like you would be a joke. You're buying water. It's like buying air. But like the COVID vaccine, you see how far we can take this control system if someone's stupid enough to buy water, or we'll make them think that everything is polluted enough, you have to buy water. So maybe the next step is you need to get our little air tanks, and you can go to, like you go to get your gas or your electric car charged, you have filling stations for your air tank. So you thought you were wearing a mask then, now you're really going to have to wear a mask because it's your air mask. So it's like going diving and going to work at the same time, but you're not in water.
So, man, how would people be able to function? Like, if we were to have communities, like, how would we be able to keep the feds off our back as far as like property tax and stuff like that, like generation of income? Like, if we don't want to be a part of like the CBDC, God grid system, like financially.
All empires have certain things in common. One of the things, and they have to have these things in place, these parts of their structure, insofar as their jurisprudence is concerned. One of the things they have to have in place is their respect, if you will, or their recognition of religious canonical setups, ecclesiastical setups. So if you designate yourself as an ecumenical, non-denominational, non-profit, meaning you're not a nonprofit and you're not a 50 anything, but you are by law, under the Bill of Rights, allowed to exist, then you set up your community as that, a so-called non-ecumenical church organization. And then you set up your paperwork that way as far as trust, not any kind of treaty, but trust, because trust refer solely, primarily, I should say, to finance. So you set up certain types of trust so that there's no ownership, but this will maintain in perpetuity the existence of your community and the land on which it stands.
So you just be like, all right, this is a Taoist temple, this is a Buddhist temple, or this is a church.
Exactly.
You're gonna get that off just by virtue of the mega religious factions.
Correct.
That they want to use to harvest people with anyway.
Correct. And then you tell everyone who has elder parents, if their parents are down with it, when they transition, to allow them to bury their bodies on the land and call them the founders.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though they're not the founders, but
yeah, I mean, hey, I mean they're part of it now.
And you've also changed your legal designation because you buried founders on the land. You can't get a royal title anymore thanks to the papacy. So that's out the question. You're not sovereign. You don't have your own currency. You don't have your own military. So you don't use those terms at all.
You're a part of a.
You're an entity on the land, as in like a national, but beyond national. You are a canonical, non-ecumenical church organization.
So, did they run tests on you on that? Did you have to pass anything, like as far as like your?
No, you set all this up through literal paperwork. That's why your community has to have either paralegals or paralegal or an attorney who is not in bed with the registry, with the bar, with the crown, with the papacy, but they have the training and the know-how. They're a renegade, and they're still within the system in the sense that they can practice anytime they need to plug in. but at the same time, they are part of your community. So you have a community that's made up of the beings that you know can assist and maintain. Not everybody has to be an attorney, not everybody has to be a permaculture expert, but you have all of the necessary components that can be teachers and stewards.
Yeah,
Because
a friend of mine, he's an attorney that works. He works in New York City for but like he works in he's like a real estate attorney because he was talking about how like the city. He talks about all the corruption in the city. How people just people will take people's buildings, like they'll take your whole house or whatever, just because of the paperwork, like little fudges and paperwork, and
Yeah,
how
you
the
can
city.
get free building through adverse possession, depending on the state that you're in. Some
Yeah,
states are easier to get than others, and it just takes between 5 and 7 years to hold out in the public eye that you are the owner of the place. You take care of it, you come and go, you get mail there, and after that period passes, you put in your quit claim deed that's your place. Squatters did that.
yeah. So he's saying like it's crazy how people will just lose houses that get passed down for years, either to the city or basically to squatters, people imposing, and it happens every day.
Because you don't own anything.
But they say possession is how many tenths of the law?
9.
Yeah.
So if you own it, you have to ask yourself, does it possess you? Because most people that own something, they're constantly wondering and worrying about it and trying to maintain it and paying this and paying that. So they become possessed by the thing they call a possession.
So it's always a two-way street with that. Anything of this realm, I guess.
Yeah, the ebb and flow. So that should be it for everyone.
Yeah. I think it's been 4 hours. I don't want to get cut off. It'll be like
Right,
cut off in any minute now.
exactly. So for those who persisted and remained, excellent. And for those who could not, wonderful. Maybe next time you'll be able to go the distance, or maybe we won't go as long.
I have more bullet points next time. I was just a little busy this weekend. I'm gonna have the next time we do this, I'll have it more concise and then yeah.
Okay. And I'll talk to you offline or off whatever this, not tonight because I'm sure you want to retire, sometime during the next 7 day period.
Okay. All right. I'm looking forward to it then.
Okay, perfect.
All right then, Farrell, man. Thank you, man. And enjoy your shadow time, man.
Equally.
All right then. Thank you everybody for listening. Pharaohshouse.com at Pharaoh's House, obviously. And yeah, man. Till next time.
See you.